From the moment the first whispers of a city made entirely of gold reached Europe, a fever took hold. It was a fever that crossed oceans, devouring reason and common sense, pulling men from their homes, from safety, from the familiar, into the unknown jungles of South America. Imagine the anticipation that gripped the hearts of explorers. Every step through the thick, uncharted forest seemed to promise a glimpse of the impossible. It was a dream, yet one that carried with it an unbearable weight of desire. Gold, in the minds of many, was not merely wealth. It was power. It was destiny. It was proof that a man could rise above his station, defy his mortality, and leave a mark that time itself could not erase. The first accounts came in fragments, rumors from merchants, letters from priests, tales from indigenous traders. Some spoke of a king adorned entirely in gold dust, diving into sacred lakes as part of ancient rituals. Others described entire cities, their walls glittering under the sun, streets paved with gold, and temples overflowing with treasures beyond imagination. These stories, repeated in hushed tones over candlelit tables in Europe, ignited a curiosity that bordered on madness. There was no way to confirm the truth, yet the allure was irresistible. The uncertainty only made the city more tantalizing, more dangerous, more real in the minds of those willing to risk everything. And so the explorers came, men of courage and ambition, but also men who carried greed like a second skin. They sailed across treacherous seas, fought storms that could tear ships apart, and navigated rivers that twisted like serpents through the dense forests. Each expedition was a gamble with fate, with the jungle itself as an enemy that seemed alive, almost sentient, ready to punish those who dared to intrude. Starvation, disease, betrayal, and exhaustion were constant companions. Yet the dream of El Dorado, the city of gold, pressed them forward with relentless force. It was not just a physical journey. It was a psychological one. Men began to see gold in every glint of sunlight on the river, in every shimmer of mica on the rocks. Paranoia crept in like the jungle fog, blurring reality. Some wrote in their journals of seeing figures in the trees, of hearing drums in the night, of strange lights dancing across the water. Others claimed to have discovered small caches of gold, only to vanish before they could reveal their locations. It was as if the city itself had a will, choosing who would glimpse its treasures and who would be swallowed by the forest forever. What made the obsession so powerful was its promise of transformation. To find El Dorado was to seize a fate larger than oneself. Ordinary men could become legends, forgotten kings could rise again, and the humble could touch the divine. Every expedition was a test of faith, courage, and sanity. And yet, for every story of discovery, there were countless tales of disaster. Ships wrecked on hidden shoals, entire crews lost to fever or starvation, friendships broken by suspicion and greed. The jungle demanded more than wealth. It demanded devotion, endurance, and sometimes sacrifice beyond imagining. But it was not only the explorers who were captivated. News of El Dorado spread like wildfire, reaching monarchs, bankers, and priests in distant lands. Kings funded voyages that drained national treasuries. Nobles plotted and schemed to gain favor through discovery, and the church warned of divine retribution, yet could not quench the fire of ambition. It was a fever that consumed societies, altering the course of history long before a single golden city had been found. Europe itself had become a jungle of desire, with maps, letters, and secret plans guiding men like moths to an invisible flame. Even the indigenous peoples, whose lands and rituals inspired the legend, played roles that would forever echo in history. Their ceremonies, their sacred lakes, and their offerings of gold were never meant for the eyes of outsiders. But the Europeans interpreted them through the lens of obsession, twisting cultural reverence into stories of unimaginable treasure. The truth became distorted, layered with imagination, lies, and ambition. And the city of gold, whether real, symbolic, or hidden, grew larger with each telling, until it became both a place and a force, a myth that could not be denied or ignored. By the time the first expeditions pushed deep into the forests, they were no longer merely searching for gold. They were chasing a legend that had taken on a life of its own, a dream that fed on human desire, greed, and hope. Some would die within sight of rivers that were never meant to reveal their secrets. Others would return with stories so incredible they were dismissed as madness. And still, the dream endured, carried on the lips of explorers, inscribed in journals, and whispered across continents. The first section of our journey ends here, but the question remains, was El Dorado merely a city of gold, or was it something far more elusive, something that could not be measured in wealth alone? What force was powerful enough to inspire centuries of obsession, to drive men into jungles where survival was never guaranteed, and to shape the course of history itself? The answers lie ahead, hidden in the shadows of legend, waiting to be uncovered by those brave or foolish enough to look. Before El Dorado became a fever that consumed the hearts of explorers, it began as a whisper, a subtle murmur in marketplaces, along riverbanks, and within the halls of European courts. These whispers traveled from the mouths of indigenous traders, carried on the tongues of priests, and finally echoed across the vast Atlantic to eager ears hungry for wealth, fame, and power. In the humid forests and high mountains of the New World, stories of a golden king and a city overflowing with riches were treated with a mix of reverence and secrecy. To the native peoples, these tales were sacred, steeped in ritual and tradition. To the Europeans, they were tantalizing puzzles, promises of unimaginable fortune just waiting to be claimed. The earliest accounts are fragmented and often contradictory, yet they reveal the tension between two worlds, one rooted in spiritual understanding, the other in material obsession. Some Spanish explorers reported seeing lakes covered in gold dust, describing ceremonies where a chief, painted and adorned in pure gold, would dive into the water as an offering to the gods. Other reports spoke of villages with walls and temples shining under the sunlight, of markets filled with jewels and ornaments beyond imagination. But these descriptions were filtered through European eyes, interpreted in ways that often distorted the original meaning. What was sacred became treasure. What was ritual became map. The allure of El Dorado was not merely its gold. It was its mystery. The city existed at the edge of the known world, where rivers twisted into unknown territories, where the jungle thickened into an impenetrable barrier, and where danger lurked in every shadow. The uncertainty made the city more real than anything in Europe. Maps could mislead, letters could exaggerate, but the dream of finding a place where gold was abundant enough to defy imagination could not be ignored. It ignited ambition, and ambition, in turn, became a force that shaped destinies. It was during these early whispers that Gonzalo Pizarro, Francisco Orellana, and other conquistadors first heard tales of the fabled city. These men were seasoned in battle, hardened by conquest, yet even they were captivated by the possibility of an empire built entirely of gold. Pizarro's letters, preserved across centuries, convey a mix of awe and obsession, a hunger not just for wealth, but for recognition, for the glory of being the man who claimed a kingdom that others had only dreamed of. Orellana, following rumors of the Amazon River's hidden tributaries, imagined a realm so vast, so laden with gold, that a single expedition could alter the balance of power across continents. But these stories were not always meant for outsiders. Indigenous communities spoke in riddles, in parables, in symbolic gestures, attempting to protect their sacred knowledge. The Europeans, desperate and impatient, interpreted these signs as literal instructions leading straight to treasure. The disconnect between intention and interpretation would prove fatal for many expeditions. Men starved, rivers claimed lives, and entire crews vanished without a trace. And yet, the whispers persisted, each retelling inflating the legend, making it richer, grander, and more irresistible. The psychology of the myth was as powerful as its material promise. To chase El Dorado was to chase transformation. Men believed that the city could elevate them above mortality, that its gold was a bridge to divinity or eternal fame. It was a dream that combined greed, faith, and destiny in a dangerous, intoxicating cocktail. Even when faced with the brutal realities of the jungle, mosquito-infested waters, venomous snakes, torrential storms, explorers pressed forward. The whisper had become a compulsion, a voice that promised everything but demanded everything in return. Europe itself became a stage for the legend. Kings, merchants, and priests debated the existence of El Dorado, each with different motives. Monarchs saw new wealth as the key to consolidating power and funding wars. Merchants imagined fortunes beyond counting, capable of reshaping entire economies. The church, while wary of blasphemy and divine retribution, could not resist the tales of offerings and rituals, often interpreting them through their own theological lens. Across the continent, the whispers of El Dorado transformed from mere rumor into a shared obsession, one that transcended geography, language, and class. And yet, amid the fever, there were skeptics. Some argued that the city was a metaphor, a story meant to convey spiritual wealth rather than material. Others warned that the jungle itself was a trap, that gold could not survive where the forest was so deadly, so vast, and so unforgiving. But these voices were drowned out by the roar of ambition, by the clanging hunger for treasure that had already claimed so many. The whispers, once gentle and cautious, had become a roar, calling men to their destinies, and often to their doom. By the time formal expeditions set out, the whispers had evolved into legend. Maps were drawn, journals were filled with promises of gold, and men embarked on journeys that would test the limits of endurance, loyalty, and sanity. Each river bend, each misty lake, each unexplored valley became a symbol of hope and terror intertwined. The jungle was no longer just a backdrop. It was an active participant, shaping events, swallowing the unprepared, and rewarding those rare few who could navigate both its physical and psychological challenges. The first whispers of El Dorado were more than rumors. They were catalysts. They ignited obsession, shaped empires, and transformed ordinary men into legends and nightmares alike. They blurred the line between reality and imagination, between devotion and madness, and between discovery and destruction. And as we move deeper into this story, one question lingers. What lies behind the whispers? Is El Dorado simply a dream born of greed? Or does it hide truths that even centuries of exploration have failed to uncover? The obsession with El Dorado was no longer a whisper. It had become a roar that swept men into the heart of the unknown. By the early 16th century, seasoned explorers like Gonzalo Pizarro and Francisco Orellana were no longer content with hearsay or distant rumors. They had tasted ambition, and the dream of a city of gold was no longer abstract. It was a compulsion that demanded action. They left the familiar coasts behind, trading the comfort of ships and settlements for rivers that twisted like serpents, forests so dense they seemed to swallow the sun, and mountains shrouded in clouds and mystery. These expeditions were not merely physical journeys. They were voyages into the deepest recesses of human desire. Hunger, thirst, disease, and fear became constant companions. Men were pushed to their limits, their sanity tested by the endless green maze of the jungle, by nights filled with unknown sounds, by days when every step forward seemed to lead nowhere. Yet the vision of El Dorado glimmered like a mirage on the horizon, urging them onward. Every misstep, every hardship seemed a small prize for the chance to glimpse the impossible. Gonzalo Pizarro's expedition through what is now Ecuador and Peru was legendary not only for its ambition, but for its horror. Hundreds of men embarked on the journey. Only a fraction would survive. Starvation turned comrades into enemies. Tempers flared, and discipline dissolved under the relentless pressure of the jungle. Rivers that should have carried them to promised lands became tombs, and dense forests hid dangers that no sword could repel. Yet even in the face of death, the idea of El Dorado burned brighter than ever. To retreat was unthinkable. To continue was madness and courage intertwined. Francisco Orellana, who would eventually navigate the Amazon River, faced challenges that tested both mind and body. His journey began with a small contingent of men, each motivated by gold, fame, or both. As they traveled further into the rainforest, the natural world revealed itself as a formidable adversary. Torrential rains turned rivers into torrents. Unrelenting heat sapped strength, and insects, snakes, and unknown predators became agents of survival's cruel lottery. Orellana and his men learned quickly that the jungle did not yield its secrets easily, and that every step closer to the city of gold carried the weight of life and death. Yet it was not only the environment that threatened these men. Human nature itself became a silent enemy. Rivalries, jealousy, and fear of betrayal festered in the heat of uncertainty. Men who had been brothers in arms turned on one another, stealing supplies, sabotaging equipment, or abandoning companions in moments of weakness. Greed, the very force that drove them forward, became a poison, corroding loyalty and reason. Some historians speculate that more men were lost to distrust and human treachery than to the dangers of the forest itself. The psychological toll of the quest was equally profound. Explorers reported seeing visions, figures in the fog, strange lights dancing across rivers, and illusions of treasure just out of reach. Some men swore the jungle whispered their names, promising riches while warning of death. Others fell into despair, questioning the reality of what they sought. The line between truth and imagination blurred until the search for gold became inseparable from the search for meaning, for destiny, and for immortality. It is here that the first tragic twist of the El Dorado legend emerges. Many who set out with hope never returned, swallowed by the jungle or lost to disease and starvation. Some disappeared without trace. Others were reduced to skeletal shadows, haunted by fevered dreams of gold. Yet even their deaths did not extinguish the obsession. Stories of those who survived and claimed glimpses of the city, whether real or imagined, kept the fever alive, passed along in letters, journals, and whispered accounts that exaggerated both danger and reward. Despite these horrors, Pizarro and Orellana pressed forward, driven by more than greed. There was a sense of destiny in their pursuit, a belief that they were chosen to unveil a world hidden from ordinary men. This conviction turned ordinary hardship into epic struggle. The search for El Dorado was a crucible that revealed courage, madness, resilience, and despair in equal measure. Every flooded river, every impassable cliff, every jungle beast became part of a narrative that elevated their journey from exploration to legend. The impact of these early expeditions was profound. They demonstrated that the dream of El Dorado was more than simple treasure hunting. It was a test of human limits, a mirror reflecting both our noblest aspirations and darkest impulses. The jungle itself became a character, shaping the narrative, enforcing consequences, and demanding respect. In their desperation, explorers began to understand that the City of Gold was not simply a destination. It was a force, something that existed in the space between hope, ambition, and imagination. Yet the allure of discovery continued to pull men onward. The few who returned from these early expeditions carried tales that were both warnings and invitations. They spoke of unimaginable beauty and terror, of gold glimpsed only in dreams, and of rivers and mountains that seemed to rearrange themselves, hiding the city from those unworthy or unprepared. Their stories, passed back to Europe, fueled a new generation of explorers, merchants, and adventurers, each ready to risk life, sanity, and honor in pursuit of the elusive promise. By the end of these first expeditions, it became clear that El Dorado was no ordinary quest. It was a journey into the extremes of human experience, where ambition met nature's fury, where hope collided with despair, and where the boundaries of reality were tested at every turn. It was a legend in motion, shaping destinies and claiming lives, and yet it remained tantalizingly beyond reach. As we follow the next wave of explorers, we will see how myths transformed into maps, how greed intertwined with faith, and how the pursuit of a city of gold became one of the most compelling and tragic stories in human history. The question that haunted every expedition remains: was El Dorado a city of gold? Or was it something far stranger, hidden not in wealth, but in the very hearts of those who dared to chase it? As the expeditions through the Amazon and Andes pressed deeper into the unknown, another force began to shape the legend of El Dorado: the power of maps. Early explorers returned with tales that were as fragmented as the rivers they had traveled, yet these fragments carried immense weight. Cartographers in Europe, working from letters, sketches, and secondhand stories, transformed hearsay into lines and symbols on parchment. Rivers became highways, mountains became boundaries, and a city of gold began to emerge, not just in imagination, but in geography. Maps, however, are rarely neutral. They are tools of vision and power, and in the 16th century, they carried the authority of kings and the ambition of explorers. The very act of charting a course toward El Dorado was an assertion that the city existed, that could be reached, that the unknown could be conquered. Some maps hinted at impossible routes, rivers twisting in ways that defied reality, and mountains that seemed to float in mist. Others concealed secrets, drawn to protect knowledge from rival explorers or to mislead competitors. Every line was a choice, every mark a narrative, and every map carried the weight of ambition, greed, and danger. The transformation of rumor into mapped legend had consequences that explorers could hardly anticipate. Once a city of gold appeared on a map, it became more than a dream. It became a goal with coordinates, a tangible destination that could be pursued, measured, and conquered. Expeditions became more organized, more ambitious, and more perilous. Men followed the rivers and ridges indicated on fragile parchment, trusting lines drawn by others who may have never seen the lands themselves. Every decision, every turn, crossing, and river bend was influenced by the delicate scribbles of cartographers thousands of miles away. But the maps were as dangerous as they were alluring. Many were deliberately misleading, either to protect treasure from rivals or to exaggerate claims of conquest. Some explorers claimed discoveries that never existed, inscribing cities of gold that were mere illusions, feeding the fantasies of kings and patrons. Others encoded secrets, hiding true paths within riddles or symbols that only the initiated could read. To follow a map was to place one's life in the hands of another, to gamble with ambition against uncertainty, and to risk everything for a promise that might be nothing more than ink on parchment. At the same time, the maps amplified the tension between myth and reality. Indigenous accounts, oral histories, and rituals were filtered through European perspectives, often distorted or misunderstood. Sacred lakes became treasure pools, ceremonial sites became marketplaces, and kings covered in gold became rulers of cities. The mapmakers were storytellers as much as they were technicians, blending imagination and observation to create blueprints of desire. This mixture of fact and fiction created a dangerous illusion that the impossible might be attainable. The psychological impact on explorers was profound. The moment a city appeared on a map, it became urgent, unavoidable, and almost alive. Expeditions pressed onward with a sense of inevitability, believing that the city could be reached if only they persevered. Each twist of the river, each climb over jagged ridges, became a test of worthiness. When a city failed to appear, frustration and despair set in, but the map itself offered hope, its lines promising that the treasure was always just beyond the next bend. Many historians argue that the obsession with El Dorado would have been impossible without these maps, for it is one thing to chase a rumor, and quite another to chase a destination meticulously charted, real or imagined. Yet maps also concealed secrets, often intentionally. Some explorers altered their charts to protect newfound routes from rival expeditions. Others recorded false locations of gold or fabricated tributaries, creating a web of confusion that would persist for decades. A map could be a guide, a lie, or a trap, depending on who held it and how it was interpreted. For the men venturing into the wilderness, each map was both a lifeline and a gamble, a fragile promise that could save or doom them. The city of gold existed on paper, in dreams, and in ambition, but rarely in reality. The interplay between myth and cartography gave rise to a new kind of obsession. Explorers began to rely on maps, not just for navigation, but for validation of the legend itself. If a city appeared on a map, it must exist. If it was missing, it must be hidden or lost. Each sketch, each scribbled river, and each symbol became a clue in an elaborate puzzle that men believed they could solve through perseverance, courage, and ingenuity. And yet, the maps never guaranteed success, only the relentless pursuit of possibility. As the legend evolved, maps spread across Europe, feeding curiosity and ambition at every level of society. Nobles commissioned expeditions, merchants financed voyages, and monarchs plotted strategies to claim unimaginable wealth. Maps became more than guides. They were instruments of power, shaping not only where men would travel, but also how they thought about the world, about conquest, and about destiny. The imaginary city of gold now had coordinates, and the coordinates demanded action. But the maps, for all their allure, were haunted by uncertainty. Rivers twisted where none existed. Mountains rose where the jungle claimed flatlands, and cities appeared and vanished in the imagination of mapmakers. Each expedition that followed a line on parchment risked starvation, disease, and death, yet the promise of gold was enough to compel men onward. They walked into the unknown, guided by the fragile lines of imagination, driven by the possibility that every step could lead to unimaginable fortune. It was here, in this blend of myth, map, and obsession, that the story of El Dorado reached a new intensity. The legend was no longer simply a tale. It was a physical and psychological force, compelling men to act, to endure, and to risk everything. And yet, for all their maps, for all their planning, for all their courage, the city remained elusive, its true nature obscured by the forest, by time, and by the imaginations of those who sought it. The transformation of rumor into mapped legend is a critical turning point in the story. It shows how human ambition can take shape on paper, how desire can be measured, and how myth can be made tangible. And as we move forward into the next phase of exploration, we will see how these maps, these blueprints of obsession, guided men deeper into danger, deception, and discovery, where the line between reality and legend blurred, and where the true test of courage awaited. Deep within the highlands of what is now Colombia, the legend of El Dorado took on a ritualistic, almost sacred form. Here, the Muisca people had long practiced ceremonies that would, centuries later, ignite the fevered imaginations of European explorers. Gold was not merely wealth to the Muisca, it was divine, a symbol of life, power, and connection to the gods. The shimmering dust that covered rulers and adorned temples carried spiritual significance, a bridge between the mortal and the celestial. To outsiders, these rituals would be misunderstood, misinterpreted, and transformed into the glittering promises of a city paved in gold. The most famous ceremony involved the Zipa, or chief, who would cover himself from head to toe in gold dust and sail upon the sacred Lake Guatavita. As he immersed himself into the waters, offerings of gold and precious stones were cast into the lake, gifts to the gods, meant to ensure fertility, protection, and balance. The ritual was precise, reverent, and deeply symbolic, a moment of divine connection that demonstrated humility even in the midst of grandeur. To witness, it was to glimpse the spiritual heart of a people whose world was shaped by the cycles of nature and the unseen forces that govern their lives. When Spanish explorers first arrived and heard tales of this ceremony, their imaginations ran wild. They could not see the sacred intent behind the gold. They only saw treasure, wealth beyond comprehension, waiting to be claimed. What was meant as devotion became a lure, and the lake itself was transformed in legend into a repository of unimaginable riches. Stories spread quickly. A king covered in gold diving into a sacred lake, treasures thrown into the water, and a city somewhere nearby brimming with gold. Every retelling exaggerated, embellished, and infused with European desire for conquest. This misinterpretation was more than cultural misunderstanding. It was the spark that would fuel centuries of obsession. Explorers, driven by dreams of wealth, risked everything to reach these highlands. They braved mountains shrouded in clouds, navigated rivers that twisted through uncharted jungles, and faced the ever-present threat of disease, starvation, and betrayal. Every step closer to the sacred lands seemed a step closer to El Dorado itself, even if a city they imagined did not exist. The ritual, meant to honor the divine, became a symbol of human greed, an irresistible promise that demanded pursuit. Yet the Muisca were not passive participants in this unfolding drama. They guarded their sacred knowledge with subtlety and cunning. Their rituals were often shrouded in secrecy, performed in locations hidden from outsiders, and guided by a deep understanding of the natural world. By directing explorers toward false trails or exaggerating what they were allowed to see, they protected their people, their lands, and their spiritual traditions. In many ways, the very legend of El Dorado was shaped by their ingenuity, a testament to human intelligence resisting exploitation. For the Europeans, however, the line between myth and reality blurred. Gold, in its dazzling abundance, became both obsession and obsession's measure. Expeditions returned with small artifacts or glimpses of gilded ornaments, confirming, in their minds, the existence of something far greater. Every fragment of gold, every whispered account, became a clue, a breadcrumb on the path to an empire that only existed in imagination. The sacred rituals of the Muisca, once a moment of reverence, became the fuel for madness, the reason men risked death, and the symbol of what could be claimed if one was brave or ruthless enough. The psychological impact of witnessing these rituals cannot be overstated. To see a man entirely covered in gold, to watch offerings disappear beneath the water, to feel the weight of centuries-old tradition, it was awe-inspiring, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. European explorers, accustomed to conquest and domination, found themselves confronted with a culture that commanded respect, even as it promised wealth. This duality, reverence and greed, would drive men to acts of courage and cruelty in equal measure. As the legend grew, the ritual of Lake Guatavita became emblematic of a larger truth. El Dorado was not just a city or a treasure. It was a narrative, a construct of desire that merged cultural symbolism with human ambition. Gold was the tangible manifestation, but the true power lay in the story, in a legend that compelled men to cross continents, face unimaginable danger, and sacrifice everything in pursuit of a dream. It was a dream that could inspire greatness, but it could also destroy, leaving only despair, obsession, and the haunting memory of what was never attained. By the time maps had been drawn and expeditions were well underway, the golden rituals had been transformed into prophecy. Explorers were no longer chasing simple treasure. They were chasing destiny itself. Every lake shimmered with possibility. Every mountain promised revelation, and every jungle path became a trial. The sacred, spiritual purpose of the Muisca ceremonies was lost to history, replaced by the fevered pursuit of wealth, a pursuit that would claim lives and shape the history of entire continents. The tension between sacred intent and human greed, between devotion and ambition, is a recurring theme in the story of El Dorado. It reveals something fundamental about human nature, the desire to claim what is revered, to transform what is spiritual into something material, and to believe that the possession of wealth can confer power, understanding, or immortality. The Muisca rituals, meant to honor life and the divine, inadvertently became the spark for one of history's most enduring legends. As we leave the highlands and the golden ceremonies behind, the narrative moves deeper into the jungle, where ambition meets betrayal and obsession meets reality. The rituals of the Muisca, beautiful and sacred, will be remembered not just for their cultural significance, but for the way they ignited a global fever that would claim explorers, inspire maps, and transform a dream into one of history's most haunting quests. As explorers pressed deeper into the highlands and jungles of South America, it became painfully clear that the greatest dangers were not only in the rivers, the mountains, or the oppressive heat, but in human hearts. Betrayal, jealousy, and ambition festered like a hidden venom among the men who had embarked on these deadly expeditions. Gold, which had first been a dream, became an obsession so consuming that loyalty and brotherhood crumbled beneath its weight. The jungle tested not only the body but the soul, revealing the dark currents flowing through those willing to risk everything for a promise of unimaginable wealth. Gonzalo Pizarro's expedition exemplifies the deadly mix of ambition and treachery that characterized so many quests for El Dorado. Hundreds of men followed him into territories so perilous that only a fraction would ever return. Starvation gnawed at the body while paranoia gnawed at the mind. Supplies were stolen, disagreements escalated into violence, and whispers of betrayal passed from tent to tent. Men who had sworn oaths of loyalty abandoned companions or plotted in secret to seize leadership, believing that only the strongest or the most cunning deserved to claim the prize. Francisco Orellana faced similar human trials along the Amazon. As the river stretched endlessly before them, some men lost hope and mutinied, while others succumbed to fear or despair. In the unforgiving jungle, human error was deadly. A wrong decision about where to camp, a moment of distrust between leaders and followers, or a sudden act of violence could result in death or permanent separation from the expedition. The very human flaws of greed, pride, and fear became as lethal as the crocodile-infested rivers, venomous snakes, or torrential storms. Betrayal often came in subtle forms. Men would hide portions of supplies, deliberately mislead leaders about the terrain, or exaggerate the wealth of distant tribes to manipulate decision-making. Even letters sent back to Europe were tainted with half-truths, exaggeration, or concealment, as explorers sought to enhance their own reputations or protect secret findings. These acts of deception amplified the dangers of the journey, ensuring that the jungle itself was not the only threat. The men were their own worst enemies. The psychological strain of these betrayals was profound. Trust, once a cornerstone of survival, became a rare and fragile commodity. Explorers wrote in their journals of fear that their companions would abandon them at night, of paranoia that whispered conspiracies in every shadow, of suspicion that every word spoken could mask treachery. The line between friend and foe blurred, and the human mind, already under assault from fatigue and deprivation, began to unravel. Some men succumbed to madness, wandering into the forest alone, never to be seen again. Others grew violent, turning on friends with the desperation of those who believed that only one could survive to claim the gold. But betrayal was not always overt or malicious. The jungle forced impossible choices: leave a wounded companion to die or risk the lives of all, ration food among too many mouths or watch men starve, press onward despite exhaustion, or face certain failure. These moral dilemmas created fractures in the group, testing the bonds of trust and forcing men to confront the darker sides of their nature. In the pursuit of El Dorado, even survival demanded acts that would haunt men for the rest of their lives. The consequences of betrayal extended beyond the immediate expeditions. Many men never returned to Europe, their fates swallowed by the jungle or sealed by treachery. Those who did survive often carried scars that were not only physical but emotional, memories of friends lost, of plans foiled, of moments when ambition outweighed compassion. Letters and journals hint at deep regrets, at reflections on how greed and envy poisoned decisions, and at the realization that human flaws could be just as deadly as the rivers, snakes, or storms. Yet, even in the midst of betrayal, courage and loyalty were sometimes revealed in unexpected ways. Men risked themselves to save comrades, guided those lost in the forest, or shared the little provisions they had left. These fleeting acts of humanity contrasted sharply with the darker deeds, reminding historians and readers alike that the search for El Dorado was not merely a story of greed and madness. It was a crucible that revealed the full spectrum of human character, from heroic to tragic. The jungle seemed to amplify these human dynamics. Isolated from familiar rules, surrounded by a world where survival was never guaranteed, explorers became both victims and perpetrators of betrayal. Every decision carried weight, every choice had consequences, and every act of ambition or disloyalty could tip the balance between life and death. In this way, the legend of El Dorado was shaped not just by the promise of gold, but by the very human failings that made its pursuit so dangerous, so compelling, and so unforgettable. By the time these expeditions concluded, whether in failure or partial success, the stories of betrayal were as potent as the tales of gold. Journals and letters preserve the human cost, the arguments, the mutinies, the abandonments, the desperate calculations that marked every day in the forest. These stories fed the legend itself, creating an image of El Dorado not only as a city of gold, but as a crucible of ambition, trust, and treachery. The betrayals among men seeking El Dorado illustrate a timeless truth. The greatest obstacles are often not the ones we anticipate. Rivers can be crossed, mountains climbed, and storms survived, but the flaws within the human heart can destroy even the most carefully planned expedition. As we move into the next chapter, we will see how many explorers vanished without a trace, how the jungle claimed its victims, and how the combination of ambition, betrayal, and danger turned the search for El Dorado into one of history's most haunting sagas. The search for El Dorado was a journey where maps, rumors, and ambition collided with a harsh and unforgiving reality, the jungle itself. Countless expeditions vanished without a trace, swallowed by rivers, forests, and mountains that refused to reveal their secrets. These lost expeditions became legends in their own right, their disappearance adding layers of mystery and fear to the already tantalizing story of a city paved in gold. Every failed mission, every crew that failed to return, strengthened the allure of El Dorado, proving that its promise was real enough to claim lives, even if it had yet to reveal itself. One of the most infamous tales is that of Gonzalo Pizarro's doomed expedition across the eastern Andes. Hundreds of men left Quito, armed with dreams of gold and the confidence of conquistadors who had conquered empires. But the Andes, with their jagged peaks, treacherous passes, and sudden storms, became a gauntlet few could survive. Men succumbed to hunger, exhaustion, and frostbite, while rivers swollen by torrential rains swept others away. Those who survived spoke of a landscape that seemed alive, almost conscious, testing their resolve and punishing even the smallest misstep. By the time the survivors returned, their journals spoke more of death and despair than of treasure, and yet they hinted at discoveries so tantalizing that the legend of El Dorado only grew stronger. Francisco Orellana's journey down the Amazon River was no less perilous. Separated from Pizarro, Orellana and his men faced an endless labyrinth of waterways, dense forests, and hostile encounters with tribes that were as protective of their lands as they were skilled in survival. Disease spread quickly among the crew, hunger gnawed at every man, and despair often turned companions against one another. Despite these horrors, Orellana pressed onward, driven by the faint hope of sighting the Golden City, the vision that had set him on this path. Every bend in the river seemed to promise revelation. Every misty morning held the possibility of discovery. And yet, the city remained elusive, teasing the explorers while they struggled to survive. The mystery of these lost expeditions was amplified by the disappearance of entire crews, often leaving no trace behind. Journal entries stop mid-sentence, letters vanish, and maps are left incomplete. In some cases, explorers were said to have encountered unknown tribes, lost in labyrinthine river systems, or perished in quicksand and hidden ravines. The jungle itself became a character in the story, acting with purpose as if guarding the city from those who were not worthy. These vanishings were both terrifying and magnetic, proof that El Dorado existed somewhere, but only for those brave or foolish enough to face the unimaginable. These lost journeys also gave rise to rumors that blurred the line between reality and imagination. Some claimed that explorers had glimpsed golden temples hidden in the clouds, only to have them vanish when approached. Others spoke of rivers that changed course overnight, erasing trails, or of animals and spirits warning men away from sacred sites. Some of these stories were undoubtedly hallucinations, fueled by fever, hunger, and exhaustion, yet they were recorded in journals and letters, spreading across continents to fuel further speculation. Every disappearance, every unexplained death, added another layer of intrigue to the legend of El Dorado. The human cost of these expeditions was staggering. Men who had set out with hope returned emaciated, scarred, or mentally broken, carrying stories that no one fully believed. Entire families awaited letters that never arrived. Kingdoms speculated on the outcomes of these missions, and the financial investments of monarchs and merchants often vanished with crews. Yet, paradoxically, the tragedy of these lost expeditions strengthened the allure of El Dorado. The more men suffered or disappeared, the more the city seemed real, as though only the truly determined could hope to find it. The combination of natural obstacles and human frailty created a deadly feedback loop. Hunger drove men to desperate acts. Distrust fractured groups, and exposure to the elements tested endurance beyond reason. Every misstep could be fatal, yet the vision of gold kept explorers moving forward. Even those who turned back carried the dream in their minds, spreading tales that inspired new expeditions. Each story of failure became a blueprint, each lost expedition a warning, and each warning a challenge for the next group of adventurers willing to risk everything. Some historians argue that the true power of these lost expeditions lies not in their failures, but in the myths they created. They made El Dorado larger than life, an obsession that no single expedition could satisfy. Survivors' accounts were embroidered with exaggeration, half-truths, and outright invention, often to protect secrets, embellish heroism, or explain the unexplainable. The line between fact and legend blurred, and the City of Gold became a mirror reflecting both the dreams and the darkest impulses of those who pursued it. The disappearances also highlighted the complex relationship between Europeans and indigenous peoples. While some tribes guided explorers with knowledge of the land, others defended it fiercely, using deception or misdirection to protect sacred sites. These interactions, recorded in fragmentary journals, added further layers of mystery. Was El Dorado truly a city of gold, or a concept protected by those who understood its power? Were the jungle and its inhabitants deliberately hiding it, or were they simply defending their way of life against intruders blinded by ambition? By the end of these early expeditions, the story of El Dorado had evolved into more than a quest for treasure. It had become a psychological and cultural phenomenon, a legend that tested the limits of endurance, morality, and imagination. The jungle had claimed its victims, the rivers had swallowed its challengers, and the mountains had hidden their secrets, yet the city's myth endured. Every lost expedition was a testament to human ambition, a warning, and a tantalizing promise that the ultimate discovery was still out there, just beyond reach. And so, the lost expeditions became part of the legend itself. They were the shadows behind the glittering dream, the evidence that El Dorado was both real and unattainable, a force that shaped destinies, destroyed lives, and inspired generations. As the story continues, we will explore the chronicles and secrets that survived these deadly quests, revealing hints, coded messages, and contradictions that suggest the city of gold was never truly lost. It was concealed, protected, and sometimes deliberately hidden from those who would exploit it. Amid the chaos of lost expeditions, starvation, and betrayal, some explorers survived, and with them came chronicles, journals, and notes that would preserve the legend of El Dorado for centuries. These documents were more than records of discovery. They were maps of obsession, filled with half-truths, coded messages, and tantalizing hints. Each page was a mix of reality and imagination, a reflection of the mind of men who had ventured into the unknown, stared death in the face, and survived long enough to write it down. The surviving chronicles were often fragmentary, their margins filled with sketches of rivers, mountains, and settlements, or cryptic symbols whose meaning was obscured by time. Explorers documented every detail they believed could lead them, or others, to the city of gold. Some described golden idols, ceremonial lakes, or villages with walls that glimmered in the sun. Others wrote of tribes whose knowledge of the terrain seemed supernatural, or of natural formations that could only be interpreted through experience and intuition. These records became treasure maps of a different kind, maps of human hope, error, and obsession. Many of the surviving accounts were deliberately coded, reflecting both fear and ambition. Explorers who had glimpsed something extraordinary but feared rivals or punishment often disguised key details. Rivers might be renamed, directions altered, or landmarks described in metaphor. A simple journal entry could hide layers of meaning, only accessible to those persistent or clever enough to decipher it. This secret language turned the chronicles into puzzles, feeding the legend while keeping the truth just out of reach. The city of gold became more than a physical place. It became an enigma, protected by the very minds that sought it. The psychological dimension of these chronicles is striking. For men trapped in the jungle, hungry, feverish, and terrified, writing became an act of control, a way to impose order on the chaos around them. Recording details, even when uncertain, provided structure to the madness. But the act of chronicling also amplified obsession. Every sketch, every description, every hint of gold reinforced the idea that the city was real and attainable, pressing survivors to continue pursuing the dream long after their bodies had been pushed to the limit. In many ways, the journals themselves perpetuated the myth, creating a feedback loop of desire and danger. Some chronicles also reveal the moral and emotional struggles of the explorers. Men documented acts of courage alongside acts of betrayal, small miracles alongside horrifying deaths. The margins contain moments of reflection, questions about loyalty, faith, and destiny. Why had they been chosen to survive when so many others perished? Were the riches they sought worth the human cost? Could the city itself be more than gold, a symbol of something spiritual or eternal? These insights remind us that the pursuit of El Dorado was not simply a material quest. It was a journey into the depths of the human soul. The journals often contain contradictions, exaggerations, and deliberate falsehoods, making the truth nearly impossible to parse. A lake that appeared full of gold in one account could be described as barren in another. Tribes that offered guidance might suddenly become hostile in the next entry. Mountains shifted, rivers changed course, and landmarks disappeared, all within the same document. Modern historians recognize these discrepancies as evidence of the extreme conditions under which these records were created. Exhaustion, fever, fear, and imagination all contributed to a narrative that was part fact, part fiction, and part hope. Even coded entries carried stories of survival. A scribble notation might indicate a hidden cache of gold, a secret path through the jungle, or a place where men had perished. These hints were enough to inspire future generations of explorers, even as they concealed the dangers that had claimed so many lives. In this way, the chronicles served both as beacons and warnings, simultaneously guiding men forward and reminding them of the perils that awaited. The journals themselves became instruments of legend, shaping the pursuit of El Dorado long after the original expeditions had ended. The surviving records also reveal a global dimension to the legend. Letters sent back to Europe reached monarchs, merchants, and scholars, each interpreting the accounts in ways that serve their own ambitions. Some saw the chronicles as proof of immense wealth to be claimed. Others viewed them as moral lessons or cautionary tales. The documents circulated widely, influencing maps, inspiring new expeditions, and embedding El Dorado deeper into the collective imagination of an entire continent. In this sense, the chronicles were more than records. They were catalysts, ensuring that the fever would continue across generations. Perhaps most haunting are the gaps in these chronicles. Pages torn, entries left unfinished, journals lost or destroyed. They create a sense of absence, a mystery that mirrors the city itself. Readers are left with tantalizing hints, incomplete descriptions, and unanswered questions, as though the explorers themselves have been tricked by the jungle, the tribes, or the dream of El Dorado. These gaps are as important as the details, for they allow imagination to fill in the void, keeping the legend alive and ever-evolving. Through these chronicles, we begin to understand why El Dorado endured. It was more than gold. It was a complex interplay of human ambition, natural danger, cultural misunderstanding, and imagination. The surviving records are artifacts of obsession, each page a testament to courage, folly, and the unrelenting pull of desire. They remind us that legends are often born not from certainty, but from survival, speculation, and the desire to make sense of a world both wondrous and terrifying. As we move from the chronicles into the next phase of our story, we will see how these fragmented records inspired new ways of explorers, how coded messages and ambiguous hints led men deeper into peril, and how the legend of El Dorado continued to evolve. The City of Gold may have remained hidden, but its imprint on human history, through journals, maps, and obsession, was indelible. The surviving chronicles, maps, and coded notes became a lure for a new generation of explorers, men who had never seen the disasters of Pizarro or Orellana, yet were consumed by the same fever. Armed with fragmented knowledge, legends, and the tantalizing promise of untold wealth, these adventurers ventured into the heart of South America, often underestimating the perils they would face. The dream of El Dorado was no longer just a whisper or a rumor. It was a challenge, a destiny, and, for many, an obsession that eclipsed reason. Each new expedition carried a mixture of hope, ambition, and desperation. Men traveled not only for personal gain, but for recognition, honor, and the chance to surpass the tales of their predecessors. Monarchs, merchants, and financiers across Europe backed these journeys, providing ships, supplies, and men, but with the unspoken understanding that failure meant death, ruin, or obscurity. For the explorers themselves, the risk was personal, immediate, and absolute. Every river bend and mountain pass could mean life or death, triumph or oblivion. The Amazon and Orinoco basins became labyrinthine arenas of danger. Rivers that appeared navigable were often littered with rapids, submerged trees, and hidden whirlpools. Dense forests concealed predators, venomous snakes, and diseases unknown in Europe. The terrain itself seemed almost sentient, reshaping paths and erasing trails, as though guarding the secrets of the land from those who sought it for greed rather than respect. And yet, the explorers pressed forward, driven by maps and chronicles that promised reward, inspired by visions of golden temples and cities gleaming under tropical sun. Among these new adventurers, ambition often overshadowed caution. Many split into smaller parties to cover more ground or follow competing leads, increasing the risk of starvation, disease, and violence. Trust became an even scarcer commodity than food or water. Rivalries between leaders, disputes over supplies, and disagreements about strategy frequently escalated into mutiny or bloodshed. Some men turned on companions, stealing supplies or abandoning the weak, driven by the conviction that only those willing to act ruthlessly would claim the prize. The jungle, unrelenting and indifferent, claimed victims indiscriminately, yet those who survived returned with stories that only intensified the obsession of those who had yet to depart. Cultural misunderstandings added another layer of peril. Explorers relied on indigenous guides, often misinterpreting their advice or misreading the significance of sacred sites. Tribes that once guarded their lands with subtlety and diplomacy could become hostile when provoked or mistrusted. Villages could vanish behind false trails, and ceremonies meant to be revered were mistaken for signs of wealth. These errors often proved fatal, illustrating that the pursuit of El Dorado was as much a challenge of understanding people as it was of navigating the jungle. Disease was a relentless companion. Fever, dysentery, and infections claimed more lives than rivers, snakes, or treacherous terrain. A single injury could become lethal, and medical knowledge was rudimentary at best. Survivors described bodies weakening day by day, men losing weight rapidly, hallucinating, or succumbing to madness in the oppressive heat and isolation. Yet even when death loomed, the vision of gold and the whispers of El Dorado propelled them forward, as if the city itself called to those brave or foolish enough to follow. Yet, amidst suffering and chaos, extraordinary acts of courage emerged. Explorers navigated seemingly impossible rapids, crossed dense forests with minimal supplies, and negotiated with tribes whose customs were foreign and often hostile. These moments of heroism and ingenuity highlight that the pursuit of El Dorado was not solely about greed. It demanded resilience, intelligence, and determination that pushed men to the edges of human capability. The jungle was not merely an obstacle. It was a crucible that tested the limits of physical endurance, moral choice, and mental fortitude. The new wave of explorers also expanded upon the legends recorded in earlier chronicles. Every observation, every sketch, every account of rivers, mountains, and villages was carefully documented, adding to a growing corpus of knowledge. These details, however, were a double-edged sword. Some entries clarified geography, offered clues about potential locations, and preserved valuable cultural information. Others embellished, exaggerated, or misled, creating illusions that lured future adventurers into peril. The line between truth and myth became increasingly blurred, as the dream of El Dorado grew more intricate and intoxicating with each expedition. Maps were updated, letters were sent across oceans, and accounts were published, inspiring countless others to risk everything. Even failures became fuel for obsession. Tales of men lost to rapids, trapped by storms, or betrayed by companions were not warnings to retreat. They were proof that the city must exist, for how else could so many sacrifices occur? Each story was a breadcrumb, a fragment of the puzzle, and each fragment reinforced the belief that fortune awaited those brave enough to endure. By this time, El Dorado had evolved from City of Gold into a symbol of destiny. The obsession was no longer merely about wealth. It was about proving one's worth, testing limits, and seeking glory. Each expedition represented the human desire to conquer the unknown, to assert control over fate, and to touch the extraordinary. The jungle was both adversary and teacher, shaping those who survived while claiming those who were unprepared, unwise, or too reckless. The pursuit of El Dorado was now fully entrenched as a psychological phenomenon as well as a physical challenge. Explorers carried with them not only supplies and weapons, but also hope, fear, and ambition, all of which interacted in unpredictable ways. Success seemed tantalizingly possible, and failure horrifyingly real. The city itself became a symbol larger than gold, a mirror reflecting the courage, folly, and obsession of those willing to chase it into the heart of the unknown. As this next wave of explorers advanced, the story of El Dorado grew richer, darker, and more complex. With every new expedition, the jungle whispered secrets, maps concealed truths, and human ambition collided with natural danger. It was a cycle of hope and despair, obsession and revelation, and it is within this cycle that the legend continued to flourish, shaping history, inspiring generations, and leaving us to wonder, was El Dorado ever truly lost, or was it always meant to remain a dream just beyond reach? As the legend of El Dorado grew, it began to transcend maps, gold, and geography, taking on an almost mystical dimension. Explorers and chroniclers, exhausted by endless jungles and unyielding rivers, began interpreting the city not only as a place of immense wealth, but as a portal to the supernatural. Tales circulated of enchanted rivers that shifted to protect the treasure, of ghostly figures guiding, or misleading, those who dared to seek it, and of sacred mountains that concealed secrets only revealed to the worthy. In the fevered minds of men driven by ambition, the city became both a destination and a riddle, an ultimate test of courage and morality. These supernatural interpretations often merged with the cultural beliefs of the indigenous peoples. The Muisca and other tribes imbued gold with spiritual significance, and Europeans, unable to fully comprehend these rituals, reimagined them through their own lens of wonder and superstition. A lake could be home to vengeful spirits, a forest haunted by unseen forces, or a temple that vanished when approached. For explorers, this blurred the boundary between reality and myth, creating an almost hypnotic allure that made retreat unthinkable. Every misstep in the jungle seemed charged with fate, every discovery tinged with a sense of the extraordinary. Psychologically, these mystical interpretations had a profound effect on the explorer's resolve. When faced with impossible odds, raging rivers, sudden storms, treacherous terrain, the belief that supernatural forces were at play offered both fear and motivation. The city was no longer merely a prize. It was a destiny. To turn back would not just be to abandon gold, but to defy the forces that seemed to be guiding the expedition. Every hallucination, every unexplained phenomenon, became part of a narrative that justified risk, cruelty, or endurance. The jungle became a crucible not only of survival, but of belief, shaping minds as fiercely as it shaped bodies. Accounts from journals hint at the ethereal experiences explorers claimed to witness. Some spoke of rivers glowing under the moon, of mist lifting to reveal golden structures that disappeared moments later, of visions of past and future events intertwined in the landscape. Were these manifestations of exhaustion and fever, or were they glimpses of a deeper reality? The ambiguity is crucial to the legend, because the more inexplicable the experience, the more compelling the story. Explorers' words, whether consciously embellished or not, wove a tapestry in which gold, spirit, and destiny were inseparable. These mystical dimensions also fueled rivalry and paranoia among men. Leaders interpreted visions as signs of divine favor or judgment, while others believed that rivals were sabotaging them with secret knowledge of supernatural forces. Alliances shifted unpredictably, trust became ever more fragile, and the fine line between courage and madness blurred. The City of Gold became a psychological obsession, a symbol of ultimate triumph that justified extreme actions. Men were willing to fight, betray, and even sacrifice companions to remain on the path toward what they now believed to be a sacred destiny. Legends of cursed treasures began to surface alongside tales of miraculous fortune. Some explorers returned claiming that gold from sacred lakes brought sickness or misfortune, that mountains themselves seemed to reject intrusion, or that certain paths were guarded by spirits that would punish greed. These stories intensified the aura of mystery, framing the city of El Dorado as both attainable and perilous. Gold was no longer simply a material reward. It was imbued with power, danger, and moral consequence. This duality made the pursuit irresistible. Few could resist a treasure that promised both wealth and meaning. The supernatural interpretations also influenced how maps were read and followed. Rivers and mountains were imbued with symbolic significance. Hidden paths were thought to be revealed only to the enlightened or courageous. Some explorers interpreted natural anomalies, fog, mirages, echoes, as signs pointing toward the city, mistaken as divine guidance, These interpretations often led men deeper into danger. Yet they also reinforced the belief that El Dorado existed beyond mere human reckoning. The city became a mythological destination, a test of intellect, faith, and daring. The interplay of superstition, ambition, and exploration created a powerful psychological feedback loop. Explorers saw the supernatural in the natural world, interpreted it through cultural and personal lenses, and then recorded it in chronicles that inspired subsequent generations. Each new expedition inherited both the knowledge and the fear of those who had gone before, deepening the mystique of El Dorado. The legend became self-perpetuating, fueled by the accounts of those who survived, those who disappeared, and those who returned with tales that blurred truth and fantasy. Ultimately, the mystical dimension of El Dorado transformed the legend from a story of material wealth into a narrative about human desire itself. It became a mirror reflecting hope, fear, courage, and obsession. Men sought the city not only to claim gold, but to confront the unknown, to assert mastery over nature, and to confront their own limits. The line between reality and imagination blurred, but in doing so, the legend gained a power that endures even centuries later. El Dorado was no longer just a city. It was an idea, an enduring force that shaped destinies and inspired exploration in ways few could have anticipated. As we leave the mystical interpretations behind, we will follow the next phase of history, the golden age of mapping and search expeditions, where science, ambition, and obsession collided, and where the line between reality and legend became almost impossible to discern. The city of El Dorado, ever elusive, continued to cast its shadow over human ambition, proving that some legends are not simply stories. They are forces that shape history itself. By the 17th century, the pursuit of El Dorado had evolved into a full-blown obsession for European powers, blending the rigor of emerging science with the unrelenting ambition of empire. No longer were explorers acting purely as individuals driven by dreams of gold. Nations were now invested, sending well-funded expeditions with maps, instruments, and precise instructions. The legend had matured into a strategic endeavor, a high-stakes quest in which success promised not only wealth but influence, dominance, and prestige on a global stage. Spain, Portugal, and later the Dutch and English recognized that locating the fabled city could shift the balance of power in the Americas. Expeditions were carefully planned, equipped with compasses, astrolabes, and rudimentary charts that promised to transform myth into measurable territory. Leaders studied surviving chronicles, deciphered coded notes, and cross-referenced reports from indigenous guides. Every detail, every observation, was weighed with precision, yet despite all these tools, the jungle remained unpredictable, and the city remained elusive. In this way, El Dorado became a test not just of courage, but of human ingenuity and the limits of early science. These so-called golden expeditions were monumental undertakings. Hundreds of men traveled in caravans, bringing provisions, horses, and weapons. Engineers and surveyors were employed to map terrain, astronomers calculated latitudes, and diplomats negotiated with local tribes. The scale of these journeys reflected the seriousness of the quest, yet for all the planning, success remained tantalizingly out of reach. Men still disappeared, rivers still swallowed travelers, and mountains still concealed their secrets. The lessons of earlier centuries were remembered, but never fully mastered. The jungle demanded respect, and El Dorado demanded obsession. Psychologically, the golden expeditions were a crucible. Men endured extreme hunger, disease, and the psychological strain of isolation while facing competitors and internal rivalries. The pressure to succeed could lead to brilliant problem-solving or devastating errors. Leaders often had to balance ambition with survival, strategy with morale, and the desire for glory with ethical choices. It was a delicate, perilous dance in which one wrong step could mean death for many. The expeditions illustrate the dual nature of human ambition, the drive to conquer and discover, and the susceptibility to fear, doubt, and greed. Maps and chronicles played an increasingly central role. By this time, European knowledge of the Amazon, Orinoco, and Highland rivers had expanded considerably. Surveyors meticulously recorded distances, sketched tributaries, and attempted to reconcile conflicting reports from previous explorers. These records were used to plan routes, anticipate obstacles, and identify promising locations for the legendary city. Yet the very act of translating observations into maps introduced errors, intentional or otherwise. Rivers shifted, mountains were mismeasured, and indigenous knowledge was often misunderstood or distorted. The result was a combination of science and imagination, a blend that perpetuated both hope and peril. Interactions with indigenous peoples grew more complex during this era. Some tribes offered guidance, providing knowledge of hidden trails, safe passages, or ritual practices that hinted at the presence of wealth. Others remained fiercely protective, using deception, misdirection, or subtle sabotage to deter intruders. Europeans learned to rely on diplomacy, gifts, and sometimes coercion, but the dynamic was always precarious. The search for El Dorado became not just a confrontation with nature, but with human agency. The interplay of cultures, intelligence, and conflicting agendas shaped the paths of explorers as much as the rivers and mountains themselves. Despite these challenges, some golden expeditions returned with astonishing discoveries. Gold artifacts, ceremonial sites, and evidence of advanced indigenous civilizations were documented and brought back to Europe. These finds fueled the imagination of kings, scholars, and financiers alike. Yet the discoveries rarely revealed the city itself, reinforcing the notion that El Dorado was more than a single location. It was a symbol of ultimate desire, a prize that would not be fully attained but would inspire extraordinary risk, ingenuity, and devotion. The human cost of these expeditions remained staggering. Disease, starvation, and accidents claimed lives at every turn, while conflict with rival expeditions or hostile tribes added further danger. Journals from this era record men who succumbed to fever alone, others who were swept away in torrential rivers, and some who simply vanished into the labyrinthine jungles. Yet the obsession persisted. Each failure reinforced the legend. Each death became a cautionary tale, and every surviving account amplified the allure of the city, creating a cycle of pursuit and peril that spanned decades. The Golden Expeditions also reveal the evolution of ambition. The quest for El Dorado was no longer purely personal. It was political, economic, and symbolic. Monarchs sought prestige, nations sought dominance, and explorers sought immortality through fame and fortune. The stakes had never been higher, and the legend had never been more potent. The pursuit of a city that may not have existed had become a crucible in which human courage, ingenuity, and obsession were tested to their limits. By the end of the 17th century, the pursuit of El Dorado had reached a zenith. Expeditions were larger, better funded, and more strategically planned than ever before, yet the city remained hidden. The combination of natural challenges, human ambition, and the persistent enigma of the legend ensured that success was elusive. And yet, the legend endured, shaping maps, inspiring chronicles, and influencing the imagination of Europe and the Americas alike. In the next section, we will explore how the obsession with El Dorado evolved beyond physical exploration, influencing art, literature, and the collective imagination. The City of Gold may have remained hidden from sight, but its influence had already become permanent, transforming the way people thought about wealth, destiny, and the unknown. By the 18th century, the legend of El Dorado had begun to transcend the jungles, rivers, and mountains of South America. Even as expeditions struggled against the natural world, the City of Gold had migrated into the imagination of Europe. Artists, writers, and philosophers became fascinated with the idea of a place where wealth, beauty, and mystery converged, a utopia untouched by time, a land where ambition could meet destiny. The fevered tales of explorers who had braved the jungles were translated into stories, paintings, and maps, spreading the obsession far beyond those who had risked their lives to see it firsthand. The literary influence was profound. Chronicles of expeditions inspired novels, poems, and plays in which El Dorado was not merely a city, but a symbol. Writers portrayed it as the ultimate reward for bravery, cunning, and moral fortitude, a test of human ambition in a world filled with peril. Each retelling added layers of drama, suspense, and moral inquiry. The city became a canvas for imagination, a setting in which human virtues and flaws were amplified, where greed, courage, betrayal, and loyalty were played out against the backdrop of a shimmering golden metropolis. The story of El Dorado, once grounded in the realities of the jungle, now lived and evolved in the realm of culture and thought. Visual art followed suit. Artists depicted scenes of explorers confronting vast rivers, towering mountains, and forests alive with danger. Golden cities glittered in paintings, sometimes imagined floating above the clouds or hidden in misty valleys. These images were as much a reflection of European dreams as they were of South American realities. They codified the legend, giving form to what had previously existed only in fragmentary chronicles and fever tales. The visual representations of El Dorado spread its mystique, making it tangible, yet still tantalizingly out of reach. The legend also influenced maps. Cartographers incorporated rivers, lakes, and possible locations of the city into increasingly detailed maps, blending fact with speculation. Many maps included "Here be gold" warnings, marking territories explored or rumored to contain treasure. These maps became guides not only for explorers, but for those who dreamed vicariously of adventure. They fueled the perception that El Dorado was both a real place and a symbol of unattainable ambition, a destination that could be reached in imagination, if not in reality. Philosophers and scholars, too, engaged with the legend, often using it as a metaphor for human desire and the pursuit of perfection. El Dorado came to represent more than wealth. It symbolized the human quest for knowledge, enlightenment, and transcendence. Debates arose over whether such a city could exist, and whether the obsession with it reflected virtue, folly, or an essential aspect of the human condition. In this way, El Dorado evolved into a story that challenged not only explorers but thinkers, becoming a mirror in which Europe examined its own ambitions and ethics. The cultural obsession also perpetuated the romanticization of exploration. The hardships of the jungle, the rivers, mountains, and disease, were transformed in literature into tests of character, making the pursuit of El Dorado a metaphor for struggle and heroism. Heroic figures emerged in chronicles and stories, representing ideals of bravery and resilience. Even failures and disappearances were romanticized, contributing to the mythic quality of the city. Men who perished became legends, their courage immortalized, reinforcing the allure of the elusive Golden City for generations to come. Interestingly, the legend's migration into culture also allowed El Dorado to evolve beyond South America. Writers and thinkers began applying its lessons metaphorically to distant lands, speculative societies, and utopian visions. The city became a symbol for idealized worlds, moral and material rewards, and the limits of human aspiration. The more tangible details of gold and treasure receded, while the philosophical and symbolic dimensions gained prominence. El Dorado became a tool for reflection. What drives ambition? What is worth pursuing? And how does human desire shape perception and reality? This cultural evolution also reinforced the enduring obsession with El Dorado. Even as physical expeditions slowed or failed, the legend persisted in books, art, and maps. Those who could not or would not venture into the jungles could still engage with the myth intellectually, imaginatively, or symbolically. It became part of European consciousness, a dream that transcended geography, blending history, morality, and human desire into a single enduring narrative. Yet, beneath the allure of culture, the real danger of obsession remained. Explorers and fortune seekers continued to be inspired by the stories, maps, and images, attempting new expeditions even centuries after the original quests. The cultural legacy of El Dorado thus directly impacted the real world. Men continued to risk life, fortune, and sanity in pursuit of a dream that existed simultaneously in imagination and legend. The city's power had become both psychological and symbolic, able to move minds and shape actions without ever revealing its true form. As the legend of El Dorado matured in European consciousness, it became clear that the city was not just about gold. It had become a vessel for human aspiration, desire, and imagination. Its story bridged continents and centuries, blending history, myth, and cultural reflection into a complex tapestry. The pursuit of the city taught lessons about endurance, morality, ambition, and the human need to seek beyond the known. By inspiring art, literature, philosophy, and maps, El Dorado proved that some legends are never confined to a single place. They live wherever imagination and desire converge. As we leave the European cultural interpretations behind, we will turn our focus to the final, emotional chapters of El Dorado's story. The modern search, the revelations, and the enduring questions that continue to haunt explorers, historians, and dreamers alike. The city may remain hidden, but its influence on human history and imagination is undeniable, a testament to the power of myth intertwined with reality. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw a resurgence in the search for El Dorado, fueled by modern tools, scientific methods, and a renewed obsession that spanned continents. Explorers of this era approached the legend with maps refined by centuries of previous expeditions, surveying equipment, and an optimism born of technological progress. Yet, despite these advantages, the jungles and rivers of South America remained as unpredictable and lethal as ever, and the city of gold remained hidden, teasing each new generation of adventurers with the same promise and peril as it had centuries before. Explorers during this period were motivated by more than gold. National pride, scientific curiosity, and personal ambition converged in expeditions that often mirrored the scale and danger of their predecessors. They sought not only treasure but knowledge, geographic, botanical, and anthropological. Each journey into the dense forests of Colombia, Venezuela, and the Guianas was carefully documented, with photographs, sketches, and journals capturing every detail. Yet, even as these modern adventurers brought method and science to the search, the legacy of the legend ensured that imagination and myth continued to shape their decisions. One notable aspect of these expeditions was the reliance on previous chronicles and coded messages. Explorers pored over the surviving journals of Pizarro, Orellana, and later adventurers, deciphering cryptic notes and maps. These documents were treated as both guides and riddles. A river marked in one diary could indicate a pathway. A mention of a golden lake could be literal or metaphorical. The challenge was to separate fact from exaggeration, to navigate a landscape that had claimed countless lives, while still believing that the ultimate reward was possible. The tension between reason and obsession became a defining feature of these searches. The jungle itself remained a formidable adversary. Diseases such as malaria and yellow fever decimated crews, while swarms of insects and tropical heat tested endurance daily. Rivers rose without warning, swallowing supplies and men alike. Hidden ravines and unstable terrain claimed the unwary. Even the most experienced explorers found themselves at the mercy of a wilderness that had not changed since the first conquistadors arrived. The modern tools provided some advantage, but nature's unpredictability remained, proving that the human heart, ambition, courage, and fear was as much a factor as the landscape itself. Interactions with indigenous peoples remained crucial. Some tribes acted as guides, offering knowledge of safe passages, hidden resources, and local customs. Others, still protective of their lands, resisted contact, misdirected travelers, or outright attacked. The complex dynamics between explorers and native communities shaped the course of each expedition, revealing that El Dorado was not merely a geographic challenge, but a human one. Misunderstanding, mistrust, or miscommunication could lead to disaster. Yet cooperation sometimes yielded remarkable insights, offering glimpses into cultures that had preserved secrets of the jungle for generations. The psychological strain of these modern expeditions was immense. Explorers contended with isolation, exhaustion, and the pressure of legacy. Unlike the early conquistadors, who faced myth and rumor, these adventurers carried the weight of centuries of expectation. They were tasked with confirming or debunking an enduring legend. Journals reveal fevered dreams, hallucinations, and profound moments of doubt. Men questioned whether the city existed at all or whether it had been a mirage, a construct of ambition and imagination. Yet, as in centuries past, the allure of El Dorado remained irresistible, pulling men forward despite the dangers. Some modern explorers reported discoveries that rekindled hope. Archaeological evidence of advanced indigenous settlements, ceremonial lakes, and gold artifacts suggested a sophisticated civilization that had once flourished in the jungles. While none of these findings confirmed the existence of a singular golden city, they provided tantalizing hints. Maps were updated, journals were filled, and speculation persisted that perhaps the legends were rooted in a kernel of truth, one obscured by centuries of exaggeration, myth, and loss. The obsession with El Dorado also intersected with emerging fields of science. Botanists and geologists documented the unique flora, fauna, and mineral wealth of unexplored regions. Anthropologists studied indigenous practices, rituals, and social structures, seeking clues about how gold was valued and used. Every scientific observation was intertwined with the myth, blurring the line between empirical knowledge and the dream of gold. The legend had become a lens through which the world was interpreted, transforming the pursuit of wealth into a pursuit of understanding. Yet, tragedy remained a constant companion. Modern expeditions, despite better equipment and knowledge, were still claimed by the jungle. Men died from disease, accidents, or starvation. Some disappeared without trace, adding to the enduring mystery. Survivors often returned physically exhausted and emotionally changed, their journals filled with reflections on ambition, perseverance, and the human cost of obsession. These experiences reinforced the duality of El Dorado. It was both a real pursuit and a symbol of the human desire to reach beyond the known, to confront danger, and to chase dreams that may not exist. By the early 20th century, El Dorado had become a legend sustained by centuries of exploration, failure, and cultural fascination. The modern searches proved that even with technology and knowledge, the jungle remained an equal partner in the story. Each expedition became part of the layered history of the city, adding new tales of courage, disaster, and discovery. The enduring power of El Dorado lay not in its physical existence, but in the human heart. The ambition, imagination, and determination that refused to relinquish hope. As we move forward, we will explore how the modern reinterpretations of El Dorado, combined with archaeology and cultural analysis, have reshaped our understanding of the city's possible existence. The pursuit continues, not just in the jungle, but in the minds of historians, dreamers, and explorers, as the legend of El Dorado endures as a mirror of humanity's eternal quest for the extraordinary. By the mid-20th century, the search for El Dorado began to shift from legend-driven expeditions to a more scientific and archaeological approach. Scholars, explorers, and archaeologists approached the jungle with modern methodology, hoping to separate myth from reality. The fascination with the Golden City persisted, but now it was coupled with a desire to understand the cultures, settlements, and histories that might have inspired the legend. The dream of gold remained, but the search had evolved into an intellectual, as well as physical, pursuit. Archaeologists began systematically studying the regions long associated with the legend: Colombia's highlands, the Orinoco Basin, and the vast, uncharted territories of Venezuela. By combining historical chronicles with topographical analysis, aerial surveys, and later, satellite imaging, researchers sought patterns in the jungle that could point to lost settlements. Every river bend, mountain ridge, and plateau was examined for signs of human activity. The idea was to uncover evidence of civilizations that had thrived, perhaps explaining the origin of tales of gold, without falling prey to centuries of exaggerated myth. One of the most intriguing aspects of these studies was the correlation between indigenous practices and the stories of El Dorado. Historical accounts described rituals in which leaders were covered in gold dust and bathed in sacred lakes. A vivid image that may have inspired the European notion of a city made entirely of gold. Archaeologists discovered ceremonial sites with gold artifacts, plazas, and sophisticated water management systems that aligned with these early accounts. These findings provided tangible evidence that the legend was rooted in real cultural practices, even if the legendary city itself may never have existed as Europeans imagined it. Excavations revealed complex societies capable of remarkable engineering, agriculture, and metallurgy. The so-called lost cities were often elevated settlements, strategically located to take advantage of natural resources and defensive positions. Temples, plazas, and dwellings reflected both artistic skill and societal organization. Gold was present, but it was not a currency for trade on the scale European explorers had imagined. It was ceremonial, sacred, and deeply entwined with cultural identity. These discoveries recontextualized the legend, showing that the obsession with El Dorado had been, in part, a misunderstanding of an advanced civilization whose values and practices differed dramatically from European expectations. Modern technology enhanced the search dramatically. Aerial photography allowed researchers to detect patterns in the canopy that were invisible from the ground. Satellite imagery revealed terraces, roadways, and possible settlements in remote areas. LiDAR technology, which uses laser scanning to penetrate forest cover, revolutionized the ability to detect ruins buried beneath centuries of vegetation. Each new discovery brought tantalizing hints. Clusters of structures that could represent ceremonial sites, hidden plazas that might correspond to descriptions of golden temples, and artifacts that linked European accounts to indigenous culture. Despite these advances, the mystery endured. No single city of gold has ever been conclusively found. Yet each discovery, each archaeological insight, strengthened the understanding that the legend was not mere fantasy. It was a distorted reflection of reality, a European dream projected onto South American cultures whose practices and values were misunderstood. The city of El Dorado, as Europeans imagined it, may have been a myth, but the civilizations that inspired it were real, sophisticated, and extraordinary. The emotional resonance of these modern discoveries is profound. Archaeologists and explorers frequently describe a mix of awe, reverence, and melancholy upon uncovering ruins or artifacts. The excitement of discovery is tempered by the knowledge that centuries of ambition, tragedy, and obsession were built around a city that existed more in imagination than reality. Yet, paradoxically, this very revelation enriches the legend. Understanding the roots of El Dorado in indigenous culture adds depth to the story, reminding us that the allure of gold, the power of myth, and the consequences of obsession are timeless aspects of human nature. The study of these sites also raises ethical questions. How should modern explorers and archaeologists interpret and preserve indigenous heritage while grappling with the enduring myth? What responsibilities do researchers have toward communities whose ancestors inspired centuries of dangerous expeditions? These questions add layers of moral complexity to the narrative of El Dorado. The legend is no longer simply about ambition and greed. It is about respect, understanding, and the consequences of imposing myth onto reality. Even today, new discoveries continue to emerge. Remote regions still conceal archaeological treasures, and the legend of El Dorado ensures that the search and the fascination persists. Every find connects us to the explorers of the past, the civilizations they sought, and the myths they helped create. The story of El Dorado remains unfinished, a living legend that continues to evolve as science, technology, and imagination intersect. Ultimately, the modern archaeological perspective transforms the story of El Dorado. It is no longer only about a city of gold lost in the jungle. It is a story of human aspiration, cultural misunderstanding, and the complex interplay between myth and reality. The city may never appear as a literal metropolis of gold, but its impact endures, inspiring generations to explore, imagine, and reflect on the limits of ambition and the meaning of discovery. As we move into the next section, we will examine the enduring psychological and cultural impact of El Dorado, how the legend has shaped explorers, storytellers, and dreamers for centuries, and why its allure remains potent in the modern imagination. El Dorado's influence extends far beyond the jungles of South America. It has left an indelible mark on the human psyche, shaping dreams, ambitions, and cultural imagination for centuries. The legend illustrates how obsession, desire, and myth intertwine to create narratives that outlive the realities they were born from. Explorers, artists, writers, and even ordinary people have been captivated by the idea of a city of gold, a place where courage, ingenuity, and perseverance could be rewarded with unimaginable wealth. It is a symbol not merely of material aspiration, but of the human longing to confront the unknown and transcend limits. The psychological allure of El Dorado is rooted in its elusiveness. For centuries, explorers risked life, limb, and sanity for a city that may never have existed. This pursuit illustrates the intoxicating power of hope and ambition. The closer the goal seems, the harder it is to relinquish, even in the face of danger. The jungle, rivers, and mountains became more than obstacles. They were tests of character, patience, and resolve. Each expedition represents a microcosm of human ambition, demonstrating how desire can propel achievement, yet also blind men to reason, ethics, and caution. Artists and writers have perpetuated this psychological fascination, weaving El Dorado into literature, paintings, and later, cinema. In novels and plays, the city becomes a metaphor for the pursuit of ideals, dreams, and perfection. Characters are tested against impossible odds, their moral choices amplified in the glittering shadow of gold. Visual art depicts explorers standing on precipices, rivers glinting with imagined treasure, or golden cities rising from misty valleys. These interpretations emphasize the human experience, the fear, ambition, courage, and tragedy that define the search. The City of Gold is no longer only a physical destination. It is a mirror reflecting the deepest aspects of human desire. The legend's cultural impact is equally profound. From European literature to modern storytelling, El Dorado has shaped notions of adventure, heroism, and destiny. It has inspired explorers to undertake extraordinary journeys, motivated entrepreneurs and dreamers, and even influenced political narratives about ambition and reward. In many ways, El Dorado functions as a universal symbol. It represents the pursuit of what seems impossible, the hope that vision and courage can overcome obstacles, and the tension between desire and consequence. Its narrative continues to resonate because it is fundamentally human, a story about the lengths we go to in order to achieve our dreams. Psychologically, the pursuit of El Dorado highlights both the noblest and darkest aspects of human nature. Courage, ingenuity, and perseverance shine in the face of overwhelming adversity. Yet obsession, greed, and disregard for human life also surface, as evidenced by historical expeditions in which companions perished, indigenous guides were betrayed, and ambitions drove men to extremes. The legend reveals how desire can inspire greatness while simultaneously imperiling those who pursue it. El Dorado embodies the paradox of aspiration. It motivates, but it also warns, reminding us that the human spirit is both resilient and vulnerable. Even a modern interpretation of El Dorado reflects these psychological dimensions. Archaeologists, historians, and writers continue to study the legend, fascinated by its origins and implications. While the city may never be found, the story continues to teach about human curiosity, cultural interaction, and the nature of myth itself. Researchers recognize that the obsession with El Dorado is less about gold and more about understanding what it means to pursue something extraordinary, uncertain, and transformative. The legend's power lies in its ability to reflect human ambition, turning each attempt, failure, and discovery into a testament to the enduring allure of the unknown. El Dorado also serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of obsession. For centuries, men risked lives, fortunes, and morality in pursuit of a dream that may have been born from misunderstanding or imagination. Yet, within this caution is a paradox. The pursuit, despite its dangers, often led to significant discoveries, both geographic and cultural. Explorers documented previously unknown rivers, mountains, and settlements. They recorded cultural practices, rituals, and artifacts that enriched human knowledge. In this way, El Dorado represents both peril and progress, showing that the pursuit of dreams, however elusive, can yield unforeseen rewards. The legend's enduring influence can be seen in modern adventure and exploration. Contemporary explorers, writers, and filmmakers draw on the myth to inspire stories of discovery and courage. The search for El Dorado continues metaphorically. In business, science, and personal ambition, humans are motivated by visions of extraordinary success, wealth, or enlightenment. The city of gold has become a universal metaphor, representing the eternal tension between desire and risk, imagination and reality. Its psychological grip persists because it embodies the essence of striving, an unrelenting quest for something just beyond reach. Ultimately, the psychological and cultural power of El Dorado lies in its duality. It is a story of both human ambition and human limitation, of imagination and reality, of peril and possibility. The city itself may have been mythical, yet its impact is very real. It has inspired exploration, creativity, and reflection for centuries, leaving a legacy that transcends time and geography. El Dorado is not merely a lost city. It is a living legend, a mirror that reveals our aspirations, fears, and the enduring allure of the extraordinary. As we prepare to move into the next section, we will examine the enduring global fascination with El Dorado, the ways in which the legend continues to inspire modern explorers, scholars, and storytellers, and the profound questions it raises about the human desire for discovery, wealth, and meaning. The city may remain hidden, but its psychological and cultural resonance is eternal, a testament to the power of myth and the depths of human ambition. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the search for El Dorado has continued, evolving alongside modern technology and globalized knowledge. Adventurers, scientists, and treasure hunters alike have taken up the centuries-old quest, armed with satellite imaging, GPS, helicopters, and sophisticated survival equipment. Yet, despite these unprecedented advantages, the jungles and rivers of South America continue to guard their secrets. El Dorado remains as elusive as ever, a dream that defies conquest, testing human determination, ingenuity, and imagination in ways both extraordinary and perilous. Modern explorers often approach the legend with a dual purpose: to uncover history and to validate myth. Archaeologists and researchers aim to document and preserve the material culture of ancient civilizations, seeking artifacts, ceremonial sites, and settlements that illuminate the societies behind the tales of gold. Treasure hunters, meanwhile, are motivated by the promise of wealth and adventure, often retracing centuries-old routes or interpreting historical maps and manuscript for clues. The motivations differ, yet the allure of El Dorado, the idea of a prize just beyond reach, remains a unifying force across generations. Technological advances have dramatically changed how expeditions are conducted. Satellite imagery allows for the detection of anomalies in the forest canopy, suggesting hidden settlements, roads, or terraces. LiDAR scanning penetrates dense vegetation, revealing structures that were invisible to early explorers. GPS and digital mapping enable precise navigation, reducing the likelihood of getting lost in the unforgiving jungle. Yet even with these tools, the challenges are immense. Rivers rise unpredictably, storms strike without warning, and terrain that appears navigable can hide treacherous pitfalls. Technology offers an edge, but it cannot eliminate the unpredictable, often brutal, realities of the environment. The psychological dimension of the quest has also evolved. Modern explorers are acutely aware of the legend's legacy. Centuries of obsession, ambition, and tragedy hang over every expedition. Many report feeling the weight of history as they traverse the jungle, imagining the footsteps of conquistadors, explorers, and indigenous people whose lives were shaped by the myth. The City of Gold becomes more than a destination. It is a symbol, a test of resolve, patience, and insight. Each decision, from which river to follow to how to negotiate with local guides, carries a sense of consequence magnified by the centuries-long saga of pursuit. Indigenous knowledge remains invaluable. Local communities, steeped in centuries of experience and oral tradition, provide guidance, context, and warnings. They can indicate hidden trails, seasonal river levels, or sacred sites that outsiders would otherwise overlook. Respecting these insights is crucial, as the jungle punishes ignorance with relentless precision. Modern explorers recognize that collaboration, understanding, and cultural sensitivity are as important as physical endurance and technological skill. The human element, cooperation, trust, and learning, remains a key determinant of success in a quest that spans generations. Despite advances in technology and knowledge, the legend's allure is fueled as much by uncertainty as by possibility. Modern adventurers often encounter natural phenomena, fog-covered rivers, golden sunsets, mist rising from hidden valleys, that echo the descriptions from centuries-old chronicles. The jungle seems alive with mystery, reinforcing the psychological pull of El Dorado. Each unexplained event, each glimmer of gold or artifact, strengthens the narrative, blurring the line between discovery and imagination. Even when the city itself is not found, the experience becomes part of the enduring legend, a modern chapter in a story that has spanned nearly 5 centuries. Tragedy and triumph remain intertwined. Modern expeditions, while safer in many respects, still face danger. Accidents, disease, and extreme conditions claim lives or leave explorers physically and emotionally scarred. Yet these challenges amplify the emotional intensity of the search, as survival, ingenuity, and endurance are tested in ways that resonate with the same courage and obsession that defined historical explorers. The jungle remains impartial. El Dorado is as much a psychological trial as it is a physical one. The enduring fascination with El Dorado also reflects broader human themes: ambition, obsession, and the quest for meaning. The City of Gold is not only a story about wealth, but a metaphor for human striving. Our desire to confront the unknown, challenge limits, and seek rewards that may lie beyond our grasp. Modern explorers, by engaging with both myth and science, illustrate the timeless tension between imagination and reality, between hope and the harsh truths of the world. The legend has become a mirror in which human ambition is reflected, refracted, and endlessly examined. Finally, the modern pursuit of El Dorado underscores the story's timeless emotional resonance. Each expedition, whether scientific, adventurous, or treasure-driven, carries echoes of centuries of human endeavor. The hopes, fears, and obsessions of past explorers linger in the jungle, shaping experiences and inspiring awe. The City of Gold, though elusive, continues to captivate minds and hearts, reminding us that some legends are never fully resolved. They endure because they touch on something universal: the human longing for discovery, understanding, and transcendence. As we transition to the next section, we will explore the enduring mysteries, theories, and unresolved questions surrounding El Dorado. From historical debates to modern speculation, the legend continues to provoke fascination, challenging our perceptions of history, culture, and the human spirit. The city may remain hidden, but its influence remains as potent as ever, bridging centuries of exploration and imagination. Even centuries after the first explorers set foot in South America, El Dorado remains a puzzle, a legend suspended between myth and reality. Its very elusiveness has inspired countless theories, debates, and speculations. Scholars, adventurers, and treasure hunters alike have sought to understand what sparked the myth, what truths may lie beneath the stories, and whether the Golden City ever existed in a form tangible to human hands. The quest for answers continues to capture imaginations, revealing as much about human desire as about historical fact. One prevailing theory suggests that El Dorado was never a city at all, but a ritualistic practice among indigenous peoples. The Muisca and other tribes performed ceremonies in which leaders were covered in gold dust and offered treasures to lakes and rivers. To European observers unfamiliar with these cultural contexts, the spectacle appeared as though the entire city and its riches were constructed of gold. Archaeological evidence of ceremonial sites, golden artifacts, and sacred lakes supports this interpretation, providing a plausible origin for the enduring legend. In this sense, El Dorado was real, but not in the way Europeans imagined. It was a reflection of culture, faith, and symbolic wealth rather than literal architectural splendor. Other theories point to the possibility of lost settlements or cities of gold hidden deep within the jungles. Some historians speculate that the city may have been destroyed, abandoned, or concealed by environmental changes long before Europeans arrived. Natural disasters, shifting rivers, or social upheaval could have erased a civilization from the landscape while leaving traces in legend and memory. Satellite imaging and LiDAR technology have revealed ruins and ancient terraces previously hidden by dense vegetation, offering tantalizing hints that advanced societies once thrived where explorers claimed gold was abundant. Each discovery fuels the imagination, keeping the debate alive and the legend compelling. Another possibility is that El Dorado was a metaphorical city, a construct of imagination amplified by human ambition. The fevered accounts of explorers, filtered through the lens of wealth, greed, and superstition, may have transformed ceremonial practices, small settlements, and natural beauty into an enduring myth of unparalleled opulence. In this view, the city never existed in physical form. It existed in the human psyche, growing richer and more elaborate with each retelling. The psychological power of the legend, then, is as significant as any physical evidence, revealing how dreams, desires, and cultural misunderstandings can shape history. Debates over location continue to this day. Scholars have proposed countless sites along the Orinoco River, the Amazon Basin, and the Colombian Highlands as potential candidates for the fabled city. Explorers' journals, maps, and indigenous accounts provide clues, yet contradictions, exaggerations, and lost records make definitive conclusions nearly impossible. Some suggest that El Dorado was not a single city, but a network of prosperous settlements, each contributing to the legend through gold production and ceremonial practices. This theory aligns with archaeological findings of multiple highland villages with advanced metallurgy, plazas, and sacred lakes, painting a picture of a region rich in culture and resources, yet not entirely conforming to European fantasies. The enduring fascination with El Dorado is also tied to its symbolic meaning. It represents the ultimate human desire for discovery, wealth, and transcendence. The legend acts as a mirror, reflecting ambition, obsession, and the lengths to which humans will go to achieve perceived greatness. Each expedition, whether historical or modern, embodies this dynamic, revealing both the nobility and peril of human aspiration. In essence, the City of Gold is less a destination than a narrative framework, a story through which humanity explores its own limits and dreams. Interestingly, even the failures, miscalculations, and tragedies associated with the quest for El Dorado contribute to its enduring allure. Men were lost to rivers, disease, and betrayal. Rivalries fractured expeditions. Maps led travelers astray. These hardships, recorded in chronicles, journals, and oral tradition, create a tension that keeps the legend alive. The city's very inaccessibility strengthens its mystique, suggesting that the greatest treasures are not always meant to be possessed, but rather to inspire courage, ingenuity, and imagination. In modern times, the legend has inspired both scholarly research and popular media. Documentaries, novels, and films reimagine the story, blending history, mythology, and adventure to captivate audiences worldwide. These interpretations reflect the dual nature of El Dorado. It is both a historical puzzle and a symbol of timeless human longing. Even when physical exploration ceases, the city continues to shape narratives, ethical debates, and cultural imagination, proving that its power is not confined to the jungle or to history books. Finally, the mystery of El Dorado persists because it touches on universal questions. What is the value of human ambition? How does desire shape perception and action? Can myth and reality coexist in a way that informs both history and imagination? Each theory, each speculation, each expedition attempts to answer these questions, yet the legend resists definitive resolution. This tension between knowledge and mystery, reality and imagination, ensures that El Dorado remains a living legend, one that continues to challenge and inspire those who seek to understand it. As we transition to the next section, we will explore the human stories behind the legend: courage, obsession, betrayal, and sacrifice, and the emotional toll exacted on those who dare to pursue El Dorado. The city may never be found, but its lessons, warnings, and inspirations endure, reminding us of the enduring power of myth and the depths of human desire. The legend of El Dorado is not merely a story of wealth or geography. It is a story of human lives, courage, obsession, and sacrifice. Behind every expedition, whether in the 16th century or the modern era, lies a tapestry of personal ambition and human drama, often overshadowed by tragedy. Men and women risked, and often lost, their lives in pursuit of a dream that existed somewhere between myth and reality, driven by hope, desperation, or the promise of glory. Their stories illuminate the human dimension of the legend, revealing both the noblest and darkest aspects of our nature. Early explorers faced unimaginable challenges. Fever, starvation, and hostile terrain claimed lives at every turn. Accounts from the 16th century describe rivers swollen with torrential rain, jungles teeming with venomous creatures, and mountains that seemed impassable. Leaders such as Gonzalo Pizarro and Francisco de Orellana pushed their men into unknown lands, driven by the tantalizing promise of gold. Yet the human cost was staggering. Entire crews disappeared, companions were left behind in exhaustion or illness, and the psychological strain fractured the strongest bonds. In this context, courage and obsession were inseparable, each expedition a crucible testing the limits of endurance, morale, and humanity itself. Betrayal and rivalry often compounded these dangers. Expeditions were plagued by disputes over leadership, resources, and claims of discovery. Rival explorers vied for prestige and influence, sometimes leading to mutiny, abandonment, or outright violence. Indigenous guides, while crucial for survival, were often caught between European ambitions and the defense of their homelands, creating tension and ethical dilemmas. These dynamics illustrate that the pursuit of El Dorado was not only a physical trial, but a psychological and moral one, in which loyalty, greed, and desperation intersected in unpredictable ways. The personal stories of explorers reveal both heroism and tragedy. Some displayed remarkable ingenuity, navigating impossible rivers, crossing mountains, and negotiating with hostile tribes. Others succumbed to fear, exhaustion, or illness, leaving behind tales of survival that border on the miraculous. Journals from these expeditions recount moments of extraordinary courage. Men swimming against raging currents to save companions, enduring weeks without food, or navigating dense forests guided only by intuition. These stories, often overshadowed by the search for gold itself, underscore the human stakes, the resilience, vulnerability, and complexity of those who dared to pursue the impossible. In the modern era, the emotional dimension persists. Contemporary adventurers and archaeologists face dangers that are less extreme but still formidable. Treacherous terrain, unpredictable weather, and the psychological toll of isolation. The lure of El Dorado continues to test patience, resilience, and ethical decision-making. The stories of modern explorers often echo the experiences of their historical predecessors, highlighting a timeless human pattern: the simultaneous drive toward discovery and the risk of obsession. The legend thus acts as a bridge, connecting generations through shared ambition, courage, and fascination. Sacrifice is another recurring theme. Many explorers lost more than lives. They sacrificed health, relationships, and sometimes their sanity. The relentless pursuit of El Dorado demanded absolute focus and often isolated individuals from their communities, leaving families behind in Europe or South America. The obsession consumed not only physical energy, but also the imagination, shaping every thought and decision. This human cost is part of the legend's enduring power. It is a story not merely of gold, but of the price of ambition, reminding us that the pursuit of dreams often comes with profound consequences. Yet these human stories also inspire. Acts of ingenuity, endurance, and compassion shine amid the hardships. Some explorers forged alliances with local communities, learned languages, and documented the cultural practices they encountered. Others demonstrated remarkable leadership, protecting weaker members, rationing scarce supplies, and navigating moral dilemmas in extreme circumstances. These moments of courage and humanity enrich the legend, offering lessons beyond the glitter of gold, lessons about perseverance, ethical choices, and the complexity of human motivation. The emotional resonance of these stories endures precisely because they are universal. Fear, hope, ambition, and loss are emotions every human can relate to, and the pursuit of El Dorado magnifies them to epic proportions. The jungle, the rivers, and the mountains become more than geographical features. They are stages upon which the human spirit is tested. Every setback, every triumph, every moral choice illustrates the interplay between external challenges and internal struggles. The legend is as much a psychological journey as a physical one, revealing the depths of human courage and the intensity of obsession. Ultimately, the human stories behind El Dorado remind us that legends are not just about places or objects, they're about people. The City of Gold, whether real or imagined, serves as a catalyst for human action, shaping lives in ways that endure long after the physical quest ends. The courage, sacrifice, and obsession of explorers create a narrative that transcends history, offering insight into the enduring power of myth and the profound emotional stakes of pursuing the impossible. As we transition to the next section, we will explore the final revelations and emotional climax of the El Dorado story, the enduring lessons, the subtle truths uncovered by centuries of exploration, and the reflection on what this legend teaches us about ambition, desire, and human nature. The city may remain hidden, but the human spirit illuminated by its pursuit continues to inspire and challenge us across generations. After centuries of exploration, danger, and speculation, the story of El Dorado reaches a profound emotional climax. It is here, in the final reflection of human ambition, that the legend transforms from a tale of gold into a meditation on desire, obsession, and the consequences of chasing the impossible. For all the rivers crossed, mountains scaled, and jungles penetrated, the City of Gold remains hidden. Yet, paradoxically, the greatest discoveries are not material. They're lessons about the human spirit, the costs of ambition, and the nature of myth itself. Throughout history, the pursuit of El Dorado has revealed a recurring theme: the interplay between hope and despair. Explorers face extraordinary challenges, often confronting the fragility of their own bodies and minds. Illness, starvation, and the unpredictability of the natural world test endurance at every turn. At the same time, the vision of a golden city, a dream that promises wealth, prestige, or transcendence, drives individuals forward with an intensity that defies logic. This tension, between the lure of reward and the reality of danger, encapsulates the essence of the human experience, magnified in the extreme setting of South America's jungles. Modern interpretations of the legend reinforce this duality. Scientists, archaeologists, and adventurers examine ancient ruins, ceremonial lakes, and golden artifacts not merely as physical objects, but as symbols of human aspiration. The ritualistic use of gold by indigenous cultures illustrates how meaning and value can differ across societies. To the Europeans, gold represented wealth and power. To the Muisca and other tribes, it symbolized spiritual authority, honor, and ritual. Understanding this distinction is part of the revelation. El Dorado, in many ways, was never about gold itself. It was about the human tendency to project desire onto what we do not fully understand. The emotional resonance of this realization is profound. For centuries, people risked lives, fortunes, and sanity chasing a dream born from misunderstanding and imagination. Yet this very pursuit left a legacy that transcends material reward. Maps were created, rivers charted, and jungles documented. Histories were written, cultures studied, and myths preserved. In failing to find the city as Europeans imagined it, explorers nevertheless uncovered insights about human nature, ambition, and the fragile line between reality and myth. The legend's emotional power lies in this paradox. The pursuit is as significant as the prize, and the journey teaches lessons that gold alone could never convey. Courage and sacrifice remain central to this climax. Across centuries, men and women displayed extraordinary resilience in the face of adversity. Navigating treacherous rivers, scaling mountains, and surviving hostile terrain demanded more than skill. It required an unwavering belief in possibility. This courage is mirrored in modern adventurers who, armed with technology and knowledge, still risk isolation, injury, and uncertainty. The legend of El Dorado is thus a testament to the human capacity for hope, endurance, and imagination, reminding us that the pursuit of dreams, however impossible, defines our shared experience. Yet alongside courage lies the darker side of obsession. El Dorado illustrates how desire can consume, distort, and blind. Rivalries, betrayals, and moral compromises were recurrent throughout history, as men pursued the city with relentless intensity. The jungle often amplified these tensions, isolating individuals and testing ethical limits. Modern explorers, aware of this legacy, still face the psychological weight of centuries of failure, the shadow of obsession lingering as they navigate both the wilderness and the human emotions it evokes. The legend warns that ambition, untethered from reflection or understanding, carries profound consequences. Ultimately, the emotional climax of El Dorado is the recognition that the city's true power lies not in gold, but in its ability to illuminate the human condition. It exposes the extremes of desire and courage, the interplay of imagination and reality, and the profound consequences of ambition. The legend unites generations across centuries, bridging cultures and continents, connecting the lives of indigenous peoples, conquistadors, modern scientists, and adventurers in a tapestry of shared fascination and struggle. In this sense, El Dorado is less a location than a narrative of human endeavor, a mirror reflecting our hopes, fears, and limitless capacity for imagination. The legend also evokes a subtle, haunting question. What do we truly seek when we chase dreams? Is it wealth, glory, knowledge, or the affirmation of our own courage and resilience? Every expedition, failure, and discovery suggests that the act of pursuit itself carries meaning. The city of gold may remain hidden, but it continues to guide exploration, shape culture, and inspire reflection. The ultimate revelation is that human ambition, desire, and imagination are the enduring treasures of the El Dorado story, more valuable than any physical gold. As we transition to the penultimate section, the focus shifts toward resolution and reflection. The enduring lessons of El Dorado, the interplay between myth and reality, and a legacy left behind by centuries of pursuit. Though the city itself remains lost, the narrative culminates in understanding, not of gold, but of humanity, ambition, and the power of dreams to shape both individual lives and collective history. As the centuries of exploration and obsession draw to a close, the story of El Dorado invites a profound reflection on the interplay between myth and reality. The city itself, glittering in the imaginations of Europeans and modern adventurers alike, remains elusive. Yet its impact on history, culture, and human psychology is undeniable. The pursuit of El Dorado is less a tale of wealth discovered than a meditation on desire, ambition, and the timeless human need to confront the unknown. Its lessons are subtle, yet enduring, shaping our understanding of both the past and ourselves. The enduring significance of El Dorado lies in its dual nature. It is simultaneously a historical mystery and a metaphor for human aspiration. Over centuries, the legend inspired exploration, scientific inquiry, and cultural exchange. Rivers were charted, mountains scaled, and ancient settlements documented. These tangible accomplishments were achieved, not because the city itself was found, but because the dream of El Dorado compelled individuals to risk danger, invest ingenuity, and push the boundaries of knowledge. In this sense, the legend is a catalyst, an invisible force driving human progress through imagination and ambition. Modern archaeology and anthropology have reframed the legend, showing that the City of Gold was rooted in the rich cultures of South America. The rituals, ceremonial lakes, and golden artifacts of the Muisca and other indigenous peoples were real, tangible expressions of cultural and spiritual values. Europeans, unfamiliar with these practices, misinterpreted them as signs of a literal golden city. Understanding this cultural context transforms the legend from a simple tale of greed to a story of misunderstanding, interpretation, and cross-cultural encounter. El Dorado becomes a bridge between civilizations, a lesson in perspective as well as ambition. The narrative also highlights the profound psychological dimensions of human desire. Explorers risked life, fortune, and sanity in pursuit of something that may have existed only in imagination. The emotional and moral stakes were immense. Courage, perseverance, betrayal, and sacrifice were constants in every expedition. The legend exposes a fundamental truth. Human beings are drawn to the extraordinary, sometimes at great cost, driven by the hope that achievement, discovery, or transformation lies just beyond reach. El Dorado, as both myth and motivation, is a mirror reflecting the best and worst of our ambitions. Ethically, the story of El Dorado reminds us of the consequences of imposing our desires on others. Indigenous communities were often exploited, misled, or harmed by explorers driven by greed and curiosity. Today, modern scholarship and ethical exploration emphasize respect, collaboration, and understanding. The legend teaches that pursuit without consideration of context and consequence can inflict real harm, reinforcing the importance of cultural sensitivity and responsibility. In this light, El Dorado is not only a story of ambition, but also a cautionary tale, one that continues to inform modern thought and practice. The city's symbolic power extends beyond history and ethics. In literature, film, and popular culture, El Dorado represents the ultimate pursuit, the impossible dream, the reward that exists only in imagination. This symbolic resonance keeps the legend alive, inspiring generations of explorers, storytellers, and dreamers. The narrative demonstrates that the value of a quest is not measured solely by its tangible outcome, but by the courage, creativity, and insight it inspires. El Dorado, in essence, is an eternal challenge, a test of imagination, resolve, and humanity. Reflection on the human cost and achievement of El Dorado reveals a paradox. The city was never found as imagined, yet the pursuit itself produced enduring discoveries, knowledge, and cultural appreciation. Maps of rivers, mountains, and settlements were created. Languages and rituals were documented. Ecological and anthropological knowledge expanded. In failing to find the literal treasure, explorers and scholars unearthed treasures of insight, understanding, and human experience. This paradox, central to the legend, emphasizes the journey over the destination, the lessons over the gold. The emotional impact of this reflection is powerful. Readers and viewers are invited to consider their own ambitions, dreams, and obsessions. How far would we go in pursuit of something extraordinary? What sacrifices are acceptable, and what costs are too high? El Dorado, hidden and unattainable, acts as a canvas onto which humans project their hopes, fears, and desires. It teaches that the allure of the unknown, the tension between risk and reward, and the pursuit of dreams are universal human experiences, transcending time, geography, and culture. Finally, the story of El Dorado concludes with a subtle but profound call to reflection. The city may remain hidden, but the lessons it imparts endure. Ambition must be balanced with understanding, courage with ethics, and desire with respect for reality. The legend encourages us to dream, to explore, and to confront challenges that test both skill and morality. It reminds us that even in the absence of tangible reward, the pursuit of knowledge, understanding, and self-discovery constitutes a treasure far greater than gold. As we move into the final section, we will tie together the narrative threads, offering a lasting emotional payoff. We will explore the ultimate legacy of El Dorado, how its myth, history, and human stories continue to inspire reflection, imagination, and ambition, leaving viewers with a sense of wonder, contemplation, and the enduring power of a legend that has shaped centuries of human endeavor. The legend of El Dorado continues to resonate across the globe, transcending centuries, cultures, and continents. Even today, it captivates historians, adventurers, storytellers, and dreamers alike. Its lasting legacy lies not in gold, rivers, or hidden cities, but in its power to inspire imagination, provoke reflection, and reveal the depths of human ambition. The fascination with El Dorado is universal, a reminder that some myths endure because they reflect truths about the human condition, our dreams, our obsessions, and our ceaseless quest for meaning. Modern explorers and scholars continue to grapple with the legend, blending rigorous research with the allure of adventure. Expeditions into remote jungles, rivers, and highlands seek to uncover the historical foundations of the story, ceremonial sites, artifacts, and settlements that may have inspired the Golden City myth. Advanced technology, from LiDAR scanning to satellite imagery, allows previously invisible ruins to be detected beneath dense forest canopies. Yet, even with these tools, the mystery persists. The city itself remains elusive, as though the jungle guards its secrets intentionally, preserving the magic and the myth that have captivated generations. The enduring global fascination with El Dorado also lies in its symbolic resonance. It is a metaphor for ambition, discovery, and the human desire to reach beyond the ordinary. Across cultures, the city represents a challenge, a promise, and a mirror reflecting the extremes of hope and obsession. Artists, filmmakers, and writers continue to reinterpret the legend, weaving it into narratives of adventure, exploration, and moral reflection. From novels and films to documentaries and video games, El Dorado exists as both a historical curiosity and a canvas upon which the human imagination projects its most ambitious dreams. Yet the legend's global impact extends beyond imagination into ethics, cultural appreciation, and historical understanding. Indigenous practices, once misinterpreted as evidence of a literal golden city, are now studied and respected as sophisticated cultural expressions. Rituals, sacred lakes, and ceremonial use of gold reveal the spiritual and societal values of the Muisca and other civilizations. Understanding these practices fosters a deeper appreciation for the civilizations that inspired the myth, emphasizing that the story of El Dorado is not only about pursuit, but also about recognition, respect, and cross-cultural understanding. The psychological legacy of El Dorado is equally profound. The legend illustrates how hope, desire, and imagination can drive extraordinary human effort, even in the face of impossible odds. Explorers risked lives, treasure hunters endured hardship, and researchers committed decades to uncovering historical truths, all compelled by the allure of a city that may never have existed as imagined. The narrative reflects a universal human experience, the tension between ambition and reality, the interplay of courage and caution, and the emotional power of dreams that are always just out of reach. Globally, the story of El Dorado also serves as a cautionary tale. History is littered with examples of ambition pushing men and women into extreme danger, sometimes with tragic results. Rivalries, betrayal, and greed accompanied many expeditions, leaving behind a trail of human suffering. Yet these dangers amplify the legend's significance, illustrating the fine line between courage and obsession, hope and hubris. The lessons are timeless. Pursuit is noble, but must be tempered with wisdom, ethics, and respect for the unknown. The legend has a particular resonance in modern storytelling because it embodies a paradox. El Dorado is both lost and found. The literal city may remain hidden, but its lessons, myths, and inspirations are tangible and accessible. Each expedition, discovery, and scholarly insight contributes to a larger understanding of history, culture, and human psychology. The city itself becomes secondary to the narrative it inspires, a narrative of perseverance, imagination, and reflection that continues to shape generations. El Dorado's global influence is also evident in education and research. Universities, museums, and cultural institutions study the legend not only as historical myth, but also as a lens through which to examine human ambition, cross-cultural interaction, and ethical exploration. The story encourages students, researchers, and the public to ask difficult questions. What drives humans to pursue the impossible? How do we interpret myths and legends responsibly? How can ambition inspire discovery without causing harm? These questions ensure that the legend remains alive, intellectually stimulating, and morally instructive. Ultimately, the global fascination with El Dorado reveals that myths endure because they speak to something fundamental in humanity. The City of Gold is not simply a tale of treasure. It is a story of human desire, imagination, and the enduring quest to explore, understand, and transcend. Its lessons are timeless. The pursuit of knowledge, the respect for culture, the courage to face uncertainty, and the humility to recognize that some mysteries may never be fully resolved. These are the treasures of El Dorado, more lasting than gold, rivers, or lost cities. As we prepare to enter the final section, the narrative comes full circle. We will explore the ultimate reflection and emotional resolution, the subtle truths revealed by centuries of pursuit, the enduring power of myth, and the final invitation to consider what El Dorado teaches us about ambition, desire, and the human spirit. The city may remain hidden, but its legacy shines brighter than any imagined treasure, leaving viewers with wonder, reflection, and a deep appreciation for the enduring story of El Dorado. As the legend of El Dorado reaches its final reflection, the focus turns inward to the human spirit, the lessons of centuries, and the mysteries that remain unsolved. Across 5 centuries, the pursuit of the city of gold has been more than a physical journey. It has been an exploration of courage, obsession, and the nature of desire itself. The ultimate revelation is subtle yet profound. El Dorado, while hidden from maps and compasses, resides in the human imagination, shaping the way we perceive ambition, risk, and the quest for greatness. The city's enduring power lies in its dual existence, both as myth and as metaphor. For centuries, explorers charted rivers, crossed mountains, and traversed jungles, believing the tangible city of gold awaited them. Yet the truth, as scholars now understand, is more nuanced. The rituals, ceremonies, and cultural richness of indigenous civilizations may have inspired the legend, but the physical treasure, as imagined by Europeans, likely never existed. This duality, the collision of myth and reality, teaches a critical lesson. The value of a quest is not determined solely by the objects sought, but by the growth, courage, and understanding gained along the way. El Dorado's story highlights the tension between desire and restraint. Explorers risked and often lost, lives in pursuit of the city, demonstrating both human bravery and vulnerability. Obsession drove men to extremes, yet it also inspired innovation, endurance, and discovery. The legend reminds us that ambition carries consequences, yet it is precisely this tension that makes human striving meaningful. Without risk, there can be no reward. Without desire, there can be no progress. The city of gold becomes a symbol not just of material wealth, but of the human capacity to dream beyond the ordinary and to pursue ideals that challenge our limits. The emotional resonance of the legend is amplified by the stories of those who ventured into the unknown. Across centuries, explorers faced starvation, disease, betrayal, and uncertainty. Yet these hardships often produced moments of profound human connection, ingenuity, and courage. Companions saved one another from death. Indigenous guides offered guidance and wisdom, and explorers documented cultures and landscapes that would otherwise have remained unknown. These human stories transform the legend from a tale of treasure into a narrative of experience, reflection, and moral complexity, underscoring the enduring relevance of El Dorado beyond its material myth. Modern reflection adds another layer of insight. Today, the search for El Dorado continues not only as a physical quest, but as an intellectual and philosophical journey. Scholars analyze the legend through anthropology, archaeology, and cultural history, uncovering truths about indigenous societies, colonial interactions, and the psychology of desire. Filmmakers and writers reinterpret the myth, emphasizing its symbolic power and universal themes. Across disciplines, the legend teaches that pursuit, imagination, and reflection are intrinsically valuable, even when the object of desire remains elusive. El Dorado thus becomes a lens through which humanity can examine itself, its ambitions, and the consequences of its choices. The philosophical takeaway is striking. El Dorado is not merely a story about gold or adventure. It is a meditation on the nature of human longing. The city, real or imagined, reflects our fascination with the unknown, our drive to seek reward beyond immediate understanding, and our willingness to confront risk in pursuit of extraordinary goals. It teaches that dreams have power not because they are achieved, but because they inspire courage, provoke thought, and shape human action. In this way, the legend transcends geography, history, and material reward, becoming a universal reflection on ambition, imagination, and the human condition. Even the unresolved mysteries of El Dorado contribute to its emotional impact. Despite centuries of exploration, advanced technology, and scholarly research, the city remains hidden, teasing the imagination and reinforcing its symbolic power. The absence of closure does not diminish its significance. Instead, it amplifies the legend's enduring allure. Humans are drawn to the unknown, captivated by challenges that defy easy solutions. The legend reminds us that the journey, fraught with danger, discovery, and reflection often carries more meaning than the destination itself. The final reflection emphasizes a subtle but profound call to contemplation. What does El Dorado reveal about our own ambitions and desires? How do we balance the pursuit of extraordinary goals with the ethical and emotional costs they may entail? How do we interpret myths, legends, and history to extract meaning for our lives today? The story of El Dorado invites viewers to consider these questions, challenging us to recognize the treasures that lie not in gold, but in insight, courage, and the human capacity to dream. As the narrative moves to the concluding section, the legend of El Dorado reaches its emotional and philosophical resolution. The city may remain lost to history and geography, yet its impact is enduring and transformative. Through centuries of pursuit, failure, and discovery, it has illuminated the human condition, offering lessons in ambition, imagination, courage, and humility. The final section will tie together these threads, leaving viewers with a sense of wonder, reflection, and the lasting power of one of history's most captivating legends. The story of El Dorado, spanning centuries, continents, and countless human lives, reaches its ultimate resolution in reflection, understanding, and wonder. The city itself, whether imagined or inspired by ancient rituals, remains hidden beneath the dense jungles and mist-covered rivers of South America. Yet the legend's true treasure lies not in gold or riches, but in the enduring lessons it offers about ambition, desire, imagination, and the human spirit. The pursuit of El Dorado is a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting the hopes, fears, and relentless curiosity that define us. Through centuries of exploration, countless adventurers have risked life, fortune, and sanity for the promise of a city that may never have existed as they imagined. The fevered dreams of conquistadors, the courage of explorers, and the determination of modern researchers all converge into a single narrative, a testament to human resilience and ambition. The legend teaches that the value of a quest is measured not only by the prize sought, but by the experiences, discoveries, and transformations that occur along the way. In failing to find the city of gold, humanity has discovered something equally precious: insight into itself. El Dorado's enduring power is rooted in its ability to intertwine history with imagination. The myths passed down through indigenous traditions, the exaggerated tales of European explorers, and the interpretations of modern scholars all blend into a single, compelling story. This narrative continues to captivate because it transcends physical reality. The city may remain undiscovered, but its emotional, cultural, and intellectual impact persists. Each generation adds its own layer to the legend, ensuring that El Dorado remains not just a historical curiosity, but a living symbol of exploration, aspiration, and human longing. The philosophical resonance of the legend is equally profound. El Dorado challenges us to consider what we truly seek in life. Is it material wealth, fame, or achievement? Or is it the pursuit itself? The courage to venture into the unknown, to confront danger, to imagine possibilities beyond the visible horizon? The story encourages reflection on the costs and rewards of ambition, reminding us that even when a goal remains unattained, the journey can illuminate human character, morality, and potential. The legend becomes a framework for understanding not just the past, but our own ambitions and the choices we make in pursuit of them. Emotionally, the legend also evokes awe, humility, and inspiration. The jungles and rivers of South America, still largely unexplored, act as a stage upon which centuries of human endeavor have played out. Tales of perseverance, ingenuity, sacrifice, and tragedy resonate across time, illustrating the extremes of human courage and folly. Even without tangible gold, the legend continues to stir the imagination, reminding us that some treasures are measured not in wealth, but in insight, resilience, and the capacity to dream. Moreover, El Dorado serves as a bridge between cultures. The rituals, ceremonial practices, and symbolic use of gold by indigenous peoples are now understood with respect and admiration. The legend highlights the importance of cultural interpretation, empathy, and historical perspective. European misunderstandings transformed cultural expressions into myths of unimaginable wealth. Yet these stories also preserved glimpses of human creativity, spirituality, and societal sophistication. In this way, El Dorado fosters a connection across time and culture, emphasizing shared humanity even amid differences. The legend's narrative also underscores the paradoxical nature of human pursuit. While the city itself is elusive, the act of seeking it has produced enduring value. Maps, journals, historical research, and archaeological studies all stem from the dream of El Dorado. Human knowledge, cross-cultural understanding, and technological advancement are part of the legacy left by generations captivated by the legend. In this sense, El Dorado is both lost and found. The physical city remains hidden, but its impact is tangible, visible in the history, culture, and imagination it has shaped. Finally, the legend concludes with a subtle but powerful invitation to reflection. What does El Dorado teach us about our own desires and ambitions? How do we balance dreams with reality, aspiration with caution, imagination with ethics? The City of Gold, though unseen, becomes a guide, a symbol of the human drive to explore, create, and understand. Its story reminds us that the most enduring treasures are not material, but intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. Courage, insight, humility, and imagination. As the narrative closes, the audience is left with a sense of awe and contemplation. El Dorado may remain hidden in the rivers and jungles of South America, but its lessons shine brighter than any imagined treasure. The legend inspires generations to dream, to explore, and to reflect, offering not just history, but a meditation on ambition, desire, and the human spirit. In this way, the City of Gold continues to live, not as a physical destination, but as an enduring testament to humanity's capacity for imagination, courage, and wonder. In the end, El Dorado teaches us that some secrets are eternal, not because they are hidden, but because they exist within the pursuit itself. The legend reminds us that the human heart, in its longing, ambition, and imagination, is capable of extraordinary feats. Gold may glitter, but insight, courage, and the unyielding spirit of exploration remain the true treasures of history. And perhaps, in the shadows of the jungle and the whispers of the wind, the dream of El Dorado still waits, an invitation for those bold enough to seek, to imagine, and to reflect on the depths of the human experience.